and everything up. And it also basically put so much work
Oh,
the rotator cuff. I needed
Oh, we have a,
surgery.
ready to go?
So
Yeah.
they cut the two muscles right
Sub-
here to
Okay, the
shoulder.
time is officially 6:32. We're going to go ahead and get the meeting started. Renee, will you call the roll?
Mr. Brewer,
Here.
Mr. McDaniel.
Here.
Ms. McCowan,
Here.
Mr. Parker,
Here.
Ms. Byrd, Mr. McClure,
Here.
Mr. Griffith,
Here.
Ms. Kindle,
Here.
Mr. Jablonski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent items. Does any member of the commission wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Does any member of the audience, does any member of the audience wish to remove any item from the consent docket? If so, announce which items are being pulled together to be discussed in their regular order. That's not on the consent docket. Only thing on the consent docket is minutes from last meeting. Can I get a motion for approval?
Move to approve. I second it.
Cast your votes.
Oops. Okay, you may vote. Yeah. Okay, everyone has voted, and the motion carried 8-0.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to the non-consent portion of the agenda. And before we do that, I'm going to make a few housekeeping announcements. One, that we're not going to allow signage in here. We don't allow signs in the chamber. If you would like to display your sign, you'll have to go to the behind the glass here to be able to do that. We do appreciate everybody coming out tonight to support your community. We're glad you're here, and we're open to listening to everyone. You will have 3 minutes whenever you come up to talk. We will give you our undivided attention during that time. And after the 3 minutes, we ask that you wrap up your comments and we'll carry on with the meeting. By the doors are some little flyers. If you have a comment, be sure to write down which item you want to comment on, your name and your address, and we'll call those in order. So item number 2 is for consideration of approval, acceptance, rejections, amendment, and/or postponement of R 23224-12. Armstrong Bank request amendment of the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan to remove Special Planning Area 7, SPA-7, while retaining mixed-use designation, and amendment of the future urban service area to current urban service area for 40.41 acres of property generally located south of East Cedar Lane Road, east of Classen Boulevard, and west of 24th Avenue Southeast. Does staff have a presentation?
Hello, I'm Laura Hoggett with the Planning Department. So we have an application from Armstrong Bank for a 2025 amendment to remove Special Planning Area 7. The mixed-use designation will remain, and then also to remove from the future urban service area to place it in the current urban service area. It's kind of hard to tell exactly what the subject tract is, where it says subject tract. There's a black diagonal line that's kind of hard to see, but this is showing that it has the future urban service area with the diagonal lines, and then moving to just plain mixed-use designation with the plain purple. Then they are also requesting a rezoning from I-1 to a planned unit development and a preliminary plat. They're requesting a PUD to have a mixed-use development with commercial. There's some apartments, a senior living facility. So here we have the I-1 zoning district for the subject tract. North of that is the Walmart and C2 zoning with the car wash. To the east is a PUD for the Lynx Apartments. South of that is industrial, and then across Chasm is kind of a mix of zoning districts with A2, I1, and some C2. The subject tract is currently vacant. Most of the land around is kind of built out. Showing the aerial with the vacant land. This is looking north on 24th, so the subject tract is to the west of this. Looking south, and this is looking north on Classen and south. And then here's just kind of an aerial perspective. The Walmart isn't shown on here, but it would be to the north of this. Here's the preliminary plat, the site development plan, and then this is the green space exhibit. I'm sorry, the green isn't showing up very well for some reason. All right. So the applicant is here. They have a presentation. Staff's available for questions, and the applicant is as well.
Does anybody have questions of staff?
I have a question. So in the proposal, it says 34.8% was open impervious space. Do we usually include impervious with open? That's one question. And then also, excluding parking lots, do you know actually how much open space there is in the proposal?
Where do you see the open and impervious?
It was on page 5 of the PUD.
Oh, that should say open and / pervious space. I'm sorry, we missed that. So we'll have them edit that before it gets to council.
Okay.
You can ask the applicant, but I'm assuming that's their intention.
Okay, because looking at the picture, it didn't look like a third of it was open space.
It is kind of spread out. I think they'll probably show their
Okay.
open space. on their slides. Okay. Any other questions for me?
I'm so sorry. Can we just have a side?
Yes.
Beth,
We want to go ahead and read the other two.
can we
items
read the other two
associated-
items?
Associated with this instead of just the one? So we don't have to have two separate votes, or three separate votes, sorry.
We did that 2 meetings ago.
So the question is whether or not we
Can I-
can take the two items together still now that the first one has been introduced and begun?
Yes.
I believe that if you go ahead and, yes, there's no reason we can't do it that way as long as you do announce the title. And you may ask the applicant if they prefer to combine their presentation as well.
Okay.
But you would want to announce the title before you go ahead and allow a motion and a vote.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and read items 3 and 4 to be combined with this. Item 3, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of 02324-3 Armstrong Bank request rezoning from I-1 Light Industrial District to a PUD planned unit development for 40.41 acres of property generally located south of East Cedar Lane, east of Classen Boulevard, and west of 24th Avenue Southeast. Item 4 is for consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of PP-2324-3, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by Republic Bank of Norman for SMC Consulting Engineers for Armstrong Bank Consolidation Project for 40.41 acres of property generally located south of East Cedar Lane Road and east of Classen Boulevard and west of 24th Avenue Southeast. We have heard the city's presentation. Does the applicant have a presentation?
I do have a couple more questions for staff. Sorry. The site plan was a little hard to read, just, I think, due to its size in digital format. I saw on there, though, that it said minimum parking requirements. Is that are there minimum parking requirements on this site?
No, so they will meet or exceed the requirements, and since we don't have requirements, they can kind of do as they wish, pretty much. They can provide what they feel is adequate for their
Okay.
proposal.
Yeah, just said on the site plan, it said minimum parking required, but that was from the applicant side, not from the city side? Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions for staff?
I have one, actually. So when I was looking at the site plan, I didn't see any space for a park. Do you know how far the nearest park is?
Um,
The only reason I ask is because it talks about putting in multifamily homes.
I honestly don't know the biggest. I mean, Saxon's really close, but I don't know if there's a smaller one that's closer. Do you know of one? Is it St. James by the church?
I have another question related to requirements. I'm looking at the open space plan. Are there tree planting requirements for open space?
They're tied to parking. So there's a certain number of trees required for how much linear footage you have along a street or along the periphery with another property. So it'll be required all along the public streets where there's parking.
And that's based on the number of parking spaces there are, the linear feet of
Yes,
parking?
well, based on the square footage of parking.
Any other staff questions? Thank you. Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
We do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean Rieger, representing Armstrong Bank here. With me is Terry Haynes in the back as well, civil engineer, and attorney Libby Smith as well. So I will get to all those questions in just a moment. Let me run through just a few other slides, and I can, Laura did a great job, as always, orienting you. I just want to show you the links is that golf course on the right. And actually, with this screen, I can answer the question about parks. If you see on the lower right here, if you see the pointer moving there, that is a public park. And so the parkland, whenever we do development, we have the option to propose one of three things. We can do a public park dedication, which is calculated by residents of what we propose in the development. We can do a private park, which takes 2 times the same area park, or we can do fee in lieu of, and that is a payment based again on a set calculation. And that payment then is made at the time of final plating, and they use those funds for presumably the nearest park. And so Parks Board, your city Parks Board makes that decision. We propose it, staff writes a report. They decide whether they want to agree with that or not. In this particular case, I believe it was last week, we were there, and the Parks Board did decide to agree with fee in lieu of. They talked about that park on the lower right, and I think probably they would be looking to put in equipment or some things in that park with these funds. There is no equipment there, is my understanding at this time. But that park on the lower left of the links was produced, was created, and dedicated at the time the links was put in. And that's oftentimes how it happens. The developer develops parkland, dedicates the parkland, but oftentimes the city hasn't funded it yet. I think there is part of the normal forward funds to go into this park as well. So that park will be the park to serve this development as decided by the fee in lieu of. So that's the park's answer. I'll get to the other questions here in just a moment. As Laura said, there's no change in the use. This is 2025, and the use is mixed use. The only change is urban service area, and as you can see, all around this, everything is developed basically, so urban service area is clearly met. Zoning, I think Laura covered. Just to get to the uses, very important on this slide, what I wanted to show you is the bank is on the sort of middle left. I see it, you see it outlined by the red. By your ordinances, when we do a development of a large tract like this, we may only have one user ready to go, and that's the case tonight. We have a bank ready to go. So Armstrong Bank will be putting a facility right there. But really, we don't have the rest of this ready to go. But by law, by your ordinances, we have to go ahead and plan the whole site. We're not allowed to bring just one little piece and get it approved. We have to plan the whole thing. So the whole site here is planned with parking, with uses, with everything. But we only have one user ready to go here, and that's the bank. So as to parking, Commissioner, you asked about the parking. I think you're right. We put the parking in on the plat. We will take that off because the PUD says it's per the city ordinances, which is no minimum. So we do intend that the PUD control here with the no minimums, and we do not intend for that sheet. So we'll alter that sheet to make sure we clarify that. We don't intend for there to be a minimum. So the uses you see here is the bank. Speculative, conceptual is the rest of these uses. We did put in a multifamily component on the right side to sort of correlate with the links across the street, and we did do senior living across the top. Now, while I tell you this is all speculative and conceptual, with a PUD, a site plan carries with it. So in the future, if this site develops differently than that site plan that you're approving, then they would have to come back before you and get it approved as a site plan modification. So while it is speculative and conceptual, if you adopt the PUD with that site plan, it does control and require a site plan change in the future. So that would be the intent. It's about 40 acres. The bank is a small part of it. You see the two detention areas on the upper right and the lower left. Multifamily, a large retail component in the middle. Office, again, really mixed uses of all kinds here. So the plat's pretty straightforward. That's the open space. Maybe you can see it a little better now. You know, Commissioner, I'm like you. Every time I look at these, I think, that doesn't look like 65%, but I can assure you the engineers use CAD development to do this, and it always is a little deceiving, but that's basically 34.8% open space. And to clarify your question, the PUD ordinance says we have to do 10 to 15% minimum open space. That is the global development, and then within each, as a conglomerate, we add up all the open space of every lot, and that's how we get to the total. And in that scheme, again, a site plan controlling with the PUD, we have 34.8% open space. So that's how we get to that number. That's in context, you see the large Walmart Supercenter at the top. There is no connection between the two. This will be connected out onto Classa Boulevard and over onto 24th Avenue. You see the links over here, the public park down here. And these are public streets that would run through the middle, and at such time as this is fully platted, those streets would then come online and connect the two section line roads. Just in summary, we had a pre-development meeting. Only 3 neighbors showed up. None were in opposition. They were frankly fellow developers from nearby wanting to see what was happening. And then they asked a few questions. Greenbelt forwarded this with no comments. Parks approved as fee in lieu of, as we talked about. Staff report says it is basically following the general guideline of a mixed-use development. And traffic engineers looked at this and saw no anticipated problems or operational issues with the development. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Do have a question,
Yes.
just related to, I know you said you'd be removing the minimum parking requirements on the plat plans itself, but what are the ratios of parking? Do they follow the minimum parking requirements, what were previous, or I guess the recommended parking requirements?
Yeah, I don't recall, Commissioner. I'd have to look to see what they put in the document, but I think generally they followed what used to be the adopted norms of minimums, but I don't remember if they altered those very significantly or not, so we'll look at it.
Any additional questions for the applicant? No? Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
I'm going to reiterate this. For tonight, we are going to require that you do fill one of these out, your first name, last name, and your address in order to be heard. For item number 2, Adam Ross.
Hello, Adam Ross, 3308 Winchester Circle. I have a couple questions. So I'm just curious, what do we define as a mixed use in our ordinance? Is it just that there's multiple uses on one property owned by the same person? Because by that definition, you could have a Walmart on 100 acres and then have an entire single-family neighborhood, and that's mixed use. My second question would be, and I'm not saying that's just a nitpick, I have genuine concerns. So the parking, I'd like to know why the developer wanted to go so far over the recommended parking in the code, especially for the elderly, the senior center at the north end of the site. There's 79 spaces provided, and there's only 40 recommended in the code. I'm still relatively new to Norman. Maybe I'm unaware that we're known for our elderly drivers, but I don't think that's really necessary. And I only say this because it is a much bigger deal than we realize. I think I've said it here before. If you look around Google Maps in Norman, you won't find a full parking lot. Maybe Campus Corner, but that might be it. In the book Paved Paradise, the author writes that we have 6 parking spaces for every car in America as a whole, so that our parking lots are never more than 16% full. This also has a major impact on the housing crisis. We have so much space allocated to parking and so little housing. We also have an ongoing battle in Ward 5 to prevent development because we have such low density development, we use up so much space. So I'm just confused why developers aren't cashing in on the new urbanist market, like things like the Wheeler District and Carlson Landing. Like homes in those markets go crazy high. I mean, and people still live there. So those are really my questions. I'd also really encourage everyone here to look into Strong Towns, the organization coming to Norman right now. The things that they offer, I really think there's something for everyone there. And it also has a huge, the arguments they make have a huge relation to the homelessness debate, which we're about to hear about. Yeah, I think that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Any discussion from the Planning Commission? Yes.
So I just want to clarify one thing. Staff from the Parks Department texted and they said that that is correct. That's Lynx Park, and it is part of a Norman Forward project to be completed in the next few years.
Thank you.
I had another question for staff. If this is the adopted site plan, it was mentioned that the PUD would need to come back for approval if there are any changes. Does that include parking ratios as far as like number of parking spots shown to the structures on site here? So let's say it went from 79 to 69 spots on the senior living site. That would have to come back for approval?
There's, within a PUD document, there is an allowance for them to request a certain percentage of change. And I apologize, I'm trying to find that right now in our new Muni code that was adopted. I believe it's 5% change, 5% either up or down in the building count. I don't think parking reduction addition is included, but I'm looking for it.
Well, and just to kind of build off of that question, I do have similar concerns that to Mr. Ross, who just spoke, that as a whole, as a development, I think this is okay. I do have concerns about this being overparked, and that's a big discussion in our community right now. You know, there was a mention of strong towns. The minimum parking requirements were removed to allow for some flexibility there. And if, you know, the kind of the plan and intent behind this, the site plan is to essentially go along with what was there before, I think there needs to be a little more thought put into how this is parked, especially if this is all speculative. If the primary intent is to build the bank building and is there a drive-through on site as well? Drive-through on site? Then my concern is, you know, really how much thought was put into the rest of the development. If outside of just meeting the requirement that you have to put a PUD to then go build this one building. So, I mean, this is a massive site. There's a lot of building speculated on site here. And, you know, my assumption is that there would be significant change in the future as to what's actually developed. So, you know, that leaves a little room for flexibility as far as, you know, this would have to come back for a new site plan for the PUD. But, and I'd be curious to hear a little more about that as far as like the time it took for designing this site and kind of the intent and outside of building just one building.
Thanks, Cameron. Yes.
So Cameron, Commissioner Brewer, sorry. I found the administrative by the planning director can allow, does not increase the proposed floor area for non-residential by more than 5%, does not increase the total number of dwelling units by more than 5%, does not increase total building coverage by more than 5%, does not increase building height by more than 5%, and provides for a decrease of up to 10% in either land coverage, height, or number of dwelling units.
Any other discussion from council? Can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve.
And a vote?
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 7-1.
Okay, item number 5, for consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2324-8. Chasm Advanced Materials request rezoning from I-1 Light Industrial District to a PUD planned unit development for 8.14 acres of property located at 2501 Technology Place. Does staff have a presentation?
Melissa Navarro with the Planning Department. We have an application from Chasm Advanced Materials Inc. to rezone from I-1 Light Industrial District to PUD Planned Unit Development to the property located at 2501 Technology Place. This is the existing zoning of the area. You can see the surrounding properties are also industrial, except for the one on the east that is a PUD, but it's also an industrial park. Here is the existing land use. It's the same thing, like most of the properties are industrial, but the lot on the north and on the west are vacant. The property in the south is a library service center. This is an aerial of the property. Here we have a view from the west side of the property. This one is from the south. And this one is from the north of the property. This one is an aerial perspective. So you can see, well, the existing building. And in this area over here, they're going to have the new proposed building. This is another view from the west. And this one is the site plan. Okay, so the applicant proposes expanding the existing manufacturing by adding a new building and an additional outdoor storage for gases that are directly related with the manufacturing process. The applicant is asking to rezone to planned unit development to add the outdoor storage of gases as a use to the existing allowable uses to the District I-1. The site plan is presented here, and the applicant is going to talk in detail about this one. This one is the open space area, which is going to be 26%. And staff forwards this request for rezoning from I-1 Light Industrial District to PUD Plan Unit Development as an ordinance number 02324-8 for consideration by the Planning Commission and recommendation to the City Council. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
We have any questions for staff?
I have a question. Do we have any zoning that regulates outdoor storage of gases, like I-2 or I-3? Yeah, so one reason this is moving to a PUD is because they have outdoor storage of gases.
Yes.
Do we have any zoning, I-2 or I-3, that would regulate that?
So in, is it I-1? You can have outdoor storage of liquefied petroleum,
In I-2.
I-2.
Yeah.
But this is not liquefied petroleum, so.
Okay.
We actually have a list of the gases that they are going to store there, but also the applicant can go into details.
I should have prefaced, I know nothing about safety of gases stored anywhere. Does the state have regulations on this? So even if we allow it, are there state laws that are going to regulate how this is done so that it can be done safely?
Well, the fire department advised that they get a fire protection engineer design all control areas, and there are some regulations that they need to meet.
Okay, thank you.
So they'll have to meet international fire code.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation prepared?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Colton Wayman with Wallace Design Collective, representing the applicant. Chasm Advanced Materials is a manufacturer of carbon materials such as carbon nanotubes. Those are used in a wide range of applications, including batteries, making concrete more sustainable. So they're really doing interesting stuff. They've actually been in Norman since 2008 at this location. I'll give you a little bit of backstory, a little bit of history on this. So in 2008, they submitted a building permit with the outdoor gas storage included. That was approved at that time, but was not actually, as I just mentioned, in the I-1 zoning district. So that made it to where they were grandfathered in with that use. So any expansion of that use would not be allowed in the future. So fast forward to today, they're requesting to rezone to PUD to continue to expand their facility. They've had a lot of success. I'll go to the next slide. But in terms of the PUD itself, it is essentially the same thing as the I-1 zoning district. So you can see the existing zoning currently and the proposed PUD. There was some back and forth about potentially upzoning to I-2, but the applicant thought that it would be better to just keep it I-1, as is the rest of that development. Just so that there's no greater intensity that would ever come into that property in the future. But as you can see, again, it's grandfathered in currently, and they're just going to bring this property up to current zoning code, allowing for all the I-1 uses that are currently allowed, and then also allowing for the outdoor gas storage. This is the site plan. Melissa went over it very briefly. To the east, as part of Phase 2, is going to be a separate manufacturing building. It's difficult to see there, but it's kind of in the southern center portion of that site plan. And then, of course, there'll be, as part of Phase 2, also increasing the outdoor gas storage. Any future phase outside of that will just be in addition to the Phase 2 structure that's built. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is also here as well.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. We did not have anything submitted for audience discussion. So can we,
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
and a vote, please?
You may vote. Everyone has voted. Carried 8-0.
Moving on to items number 6 and 7. I will reiterate, if you do wish to make a comment, please fill out one of the comment cards located by the doors. Include your first name, last name. Item number 6, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution number R-2324-24, City of Norman request amendment of the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan from office designation and commercial designation to institutional designation for 718 North Porter Avenue. Item 7, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O2324-6, City of Norman request rezoning from C-2, General Commercial District, and RM-2, Low Density Apartment District, to PUD, Planned Unit Development, for approximately 0.85 acres of property located at 718 North Porter Avenue. We have a presentation from staff.
Yes, and I'm Laura Hoggett with the Planning Department. I'm going to go ahead and preface that since this is an application from the City of Norman, I do my regular staff presentation, and then another staff member is going to come up as the applicant presentation. Okay, so this is an application from the City of Norman for a 2025 amendment from office and commercial to institutional. The eastern part of the tract is currently commercial, with the western part being office. It's surrounded mostly by office and commercial land use, with mixed use across the street for the hospital. They're requesting institutional. And then a rezoning from C2 and RM2 to a SPUD, Simple Planned Unit Development. So currently the east part of the tract is the C2 part, with the RM2 where the parking is in the rear on the west side. It's surrounded to the west with R3, which is our kind of multifamily district. Commercial all along Porter, and then the hospital's PUD across Porter. The existing land use, there's a vacant office building on the lot with parking in the rear, with commercial buildings along Porter, obviously, parking for the hospital across the street, and then residential units surrounding. So here's the aerial with the site as it is right now. We do have a protest right now of 53.3% of the notification area. The lots that have the diagonal white lines are protest letters that were not within the radius for the notification area. This is looking at the building from Porter. Also looking from Porter and Rich Street. That's looking towards the west on Rich, where the empty parking lot is. This is the rear of the building. The rear from the alleyway. Just another perspective of the aerial, kind of showing the surrounding uses. And then here's the proposed site plan. I apologize, on the PowerPoint out here, it's not super easy to read, but the existing building will remain in the same footprint and configuration as it is. Parking will be along Porter. There's no access on Porter. It's coming off Rich Street or the alleyway. And then the rear will be completely fenced in. There's a pedestrian access point I guess on the southeast part of the, or I guess that's not the southeast, on the north part of the courtyard open space area with landscaping along the west. We were kind of trying to follow the Porter Corridors zoning overlay district that requires a landscaping strip and a wall buffer. And then Anthony Purington from our legal department will follow up with the rest.
All right, thank you.
Oh,
Do you want to take
should we
questions?
do staff questions or just wait? What would you?
Okay.
Good evening. Anthony Purington, Assistant City Attorney for the city. I have not had the pleasure yet to come before Planning Commission, so this is my first night, so thank you guys for having me. I think you guys are more used to seeing Beth. So I'm going to give I guess what would normally be considered the applicant presentation, but it is the city, so that's why kind of we're switching off. Laura did a great job kind of describing the site plan for the property. What I kind of want to bring to your attention now is kind of the background of how we got here to Planning Commission today. So how this came about, the city currently owns property 109 West Gray Street, where an emergency low barrier overnight shelter is operated. The city contracts with Food and Shelter, Inc. to run the operation of that shelter. On June 13th, the city council had their budgetary meeting. During that meeting, they allocated $500,000 for the renovation of this building, 718 North Porter. The city acquired the building in 2022, and it has been sitting vacant since then. Previously to the city obtaining that building, it was owned by Norman Regional, where they operated it for office use as well as for, I think, a retail medical equipment site. In addition to the budget allocation on June 13th, City Council also had a meeting. So I think it was a study session or a special session where City Council directed staff to begin evaluating and preparing 718 North Porter to be used as an alternative temporary location for the warming shelter. And then later in the month of June, after staff investigation and preparation, staff presented the issue again to council, gave them a little bit more information, which if you guys have questions about that, I'm happy to answer. And the result of that meeting was council directing city staff to go forward with the rezoning in order to rezone it for use as a low barrier temporary overnight shelter. So I want to talk a little bit more about the SPUD document. So first I'll start off with the permitted uses that would be allowed under the SPUD. The first is obvious. It will be a low barrier emergency shelter to be used for those experiencing homelessness. What this potentially could include, which is what we've included in the SPUD document, that could include shelter and basic needs services, case management services, and limited and temporary related property storage associated with use of that facility for that purpose. We've also narrowed down the current uses that are allowed under the zoning to include office buildings and office uses, pharmacy, place of worship, and a trade school and schools for vocational training. We selected those uses to narrow it down to based on the surrounding area and the expected uses after this. And so those are the uses that we have contemplated in the SPUD. I also want to bring up, this does lie currently within the Porter Corridor Overlay District. In the SPUD document, we did want to comply with the spirit of the Porter Corridor requirements. And what we have tried to do is either meet or exceed those requirements. For example, if you look on the site plan, you'll notice that the back half of the property, what used to be the back parking lot is now enclosed with an 8-foot masonry fence. The Porter Corridor Overlay District requires a 4-foot masonry fence when it abuts a residential area with a commercial. So we wanted to exceed that and not only do that where it meets the residential, but go ahead and enclose that area where we think will be mostly used by the clients of the establishment. Also, you'll notice that there is the landscape buffer where the property abuts the residential to the west. And again, that is a Porter Corridor Overlay District requirement. So that is a very quick overview of how we got here and a little bit more. I know Laura already kind of explained the site plan, but if you guys have any questions at this time for staff, I'm sure you have plenty. We are happy to answer.
Do we have questions of staff or the city?
Yes, I do. You said temporary. So what is the long-term plan, and can you define sort of, as best you can, what temporary means?
That depends on who you ask, I think. The city has operated a temporary overnight shelter for a while. It began at the old library, then it moved to, I believe, is it the Comanche location? Now it's at Gray Street, and now we're recommending, or City Council has directed us to do 718 North Porter. All of those have been temporary, as in we have not stayed there, right? But the one thing that has remained consistent is the City Council's dedication to, providing the service to the public. A temporary, I think the city, I think either early this year or late last year, issued an RFP for a permanent shelter location and an operator. Unfortunately, while we were able to choose an operator, which was Food and Shelter, part of the requirement of that RFP was to, for the selected applicant to find a permanent location. It has been very difficult to find a permanent location. I think that everyone can agree there is no perfect location for this use, right? So what the city has had to do, because then the alternative would to not offer the service, and I think the direction from council is clear that that is not an option, especially in the winter time, is that we find buildings, as it has shown, that have been either already owned or operated by the city, and then we rush to, bring that up to a usable space so that we can offer the service. So at council's direction, this is the next building that we've looked at. I think there is still, I think the idea that at least council has seemed to have indicate that a permanent location is still the goal, right? There are a lot of things I know when talking to the operator that we want to have at a permanent location that all previous locations have not been able to accommodate, including this one. So I think that is the goal. However, we have not been able to find a location for a few years, and we don't know when that location will become available. So, if I had a crystal ball, they'd pay me a lot more money. But unfortunately, at this time, I think we're waiting in order to find that location, which may come, with, I think the Department of Mental Health has, recently said they're moving to Oklahoma City. That might free up some land. Right now, we don't know, right? But what council has said, we need a place, and they've directed us to, evaluate this and rezone it for that purpose. I know that's a long-winded answer, but I think that question is really important, and I think it deserves a little bit more of a lengthy answer.
Agreed. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
I actually have a question following up with that. How long was the temporary for each of the other locations? Do you know?
Let's see. So obviously, the old library is now the development center, right? We had to move out of the old library in order to begin construction on the development center. I believe that may have been used less than a year. Then we went to the Comanche location. I think we used that for maybe a year, maybe 18 months. And we have been at this current location. I don't think we had a location summer of last year, and we did not offer this service. And we've been in this location on Gray Street since November of last year. And I think, again, we have no idea of knowing for sure, but the idea is that hopefully in 2 to 3 years of using this location, a permanent location, will be obtained by the city and/or an operator.
Any other questions for staff?
I have one. What is the proposed capacity for the new facility?
That's another really good question, and one we don't currently have a concrete answer, because again, that's going to depend on a lot of variables. So, take this answer with a grain of salt, because it depends on whether you can have bunk beds, right? What's the, fire code requirements, the egress requirements. We're anticipating, because again, it'll probably only be the first floor of the building that will be used for that purpose, anywhere from 60 to 100. But again, I can't guarantee that. That's going to be way later down on the road when we have more design work done and fire and planning can evaluate that from a health and safety standpoint.
Yeah, let's limit comments. We'll have a chance for audience comments in a moment.
This relates to, it may relate to the final design, but you said there was an allocation of $500,000 from the budget from council. Are there any updated estimates as far as what this will actually cost us to redevelop to make it suitable to be a shelter?
I call that the preliminary estimate, the $500,000. The preliminary estimate, which is a rough estimate, is anywhere from, I believe, $1.5 to $2 million. And the reason that was adjusted upwards is because when you go from a lower intensity use, such as commercial, to one where you're going to have people living, at least, well, maybe not living, but staying there overnight, from a code, fire, health, and safety standpoint, the requirements are much higher. And so in order to go up to that use, for the code requirements, it would cost a little bit more than, well, a lot more than we were expecting. For example, like fire separation, stuff like that. The layout would have to change, for example.
I have a question. So is the intent that this is temporary until whenever a permanent location is found?
So keep in mind that, this was the idea of this being the new temporary location was one that we got consensus at a council special session, right? So this is current council's anticipated use for the property. So it is intended to be a temporary location currently, right? That does not necessarily mean that plan can't change in the future if council so directs.
Okay, so it very well, after 1.2 million is poured into it, become a permanent location?
I think that has been, at least I think once, thrown out there. Again, because it's so preliminary and council hasn't, made any concrete, detailed decisions, I can't tell you for certain that, council, that will be decided at any point. But there is nothing that says that council couldn't, at a later date, make it the permanent location.
I appreciate your transparency on that. Thank you.
Of course, yeah.
Has there been other locations other than this one for this specific time that has been discussed, maybe like the Griffin property, that could end up being a permanent location down the road?
So if the question is, has city staff looked at other potential locations? Yes. Are those potential locations feasible, available, so on and so forth? Not at this time. But, city staff, since I think we've started operating the shelter, has been on the lookout for a permanent location where we could, and I think the idea is build new, right? It would be much cheaper probably to build from the ground up what we want, because this is a very, specific kind of building that we're looking for with specific requirements. It would probably cost more to refurbish a building to get it to where we want it than to build new. that requires, either fresh land or demolishing something that's already existing. Plus, when you consider the type of usage and the intensity of the usage, that makes for a very difficult piece of property. So we're kind of looking for a unicorn, as it's been said. But that doesn't mean we're not looking, so.
So that just basically reaffirms that this temporary is more likely to be permanent.
Not necessarily. I
Haven't found any unicorns lately, so.
No, but keep in mind, this location is not a perfect location. I don't think anyone here would say it's the perfect location, right? And keep in mind, if we're going towards, offering the service, council has directed and has time and time again said this service needs to be offered. I think it goes to also show that council is committed to providing good quality service in a location that is well suited to serve that purpose. Every location that we've had has been temporary. It's had its problems, it's had its difficulties. Staff has worked tirelessly to overcome those and compensate for those where we can. And I think that even, the operator and the city, we would not be comfortable in this building long-term, right? Using it as the use we have and learning from what we've learned from the past operations of the shelter. And I do believe that council, if given the opportunity to build a better shelter on a piece of location that would become available, considering council's actions within the last year, it could change, obviously, right? It is a rotating body. But I do believe, based on previous commitment from the council, that that would definitely be something they would prioritize.
Just to clarify, it's 500,000 that has been allocated, correct?
It would need more than that.
And it's going to need more than that. And does the city have funding for that?
I believe so. I wish Anthony Francisco were here. I think that, given that amount and council understanding that amount, they still did go forward. So I believe that with council's intent, that the money could be found somewhere.
I have that. Go ahead.
So let's assume that this moves forward and council finds the money. Cold weather comes in just a few months. Is that adequate time? Because I understand the lease on the current shelter is going to be terminated.
Okay, so actually we own the building. So we currently have a contract with the operator. Our lease, we don't have one because we own the building. So that isn't necessarily a limiting factor for the city. It would be up to council whether to renew that contract. It's on a month-to-month basis right now. But I can see council continuing with that contract until this property is made livable.
Okay, that was my question.
And that could be, just to further answer your question, anywhere from 12 to 18 months maybe after or once construction starts.
So I have one more thing. Apologize. I hear 500,000. I hear 1.2 million. I hear all these different numbers and stuff. Have we looked at, and I'm sure that we have, I just don't know the answers to this. What is the economic impact in a negative sense that's going to deal with these businesses that are immediately right there beside this building? There's Sonic right across the street. There's the new Boomerang. There's Tara Mahara's that probably everybody in this room has been to. What's the negative impact of us spending $500,000 to what these businesses could easily lose for their $500,000? And where do we push forward to try to make it safe for, and I've seen some of the different reports on vandalism, et cetera. What are we going to do to make it safe for the patrons and the businesses in this area if we move forward with this, please?
There are, I think, a couple of questions there. I just want to make sure all of them are answered. I think the first is, what is the actual economic impact it would have on surrounding businesses? Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that, and any answer we could give would be speculative. And I guarantee you, you ask 5 different people that question, you're going to get 5 totally different answers. That isn't to say that there aren't going to be real consequences to the surrounding neighborhood. Any development is going to affect the surrounding development. And that's, the reason why we have a planning commission and a city council is to weigh those. And I wish I could give you a better criterion on which to weigh that in terms of dollar figures, but I can't. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have public comment, is so you can kind of get those viewpoints. The second question is, how can we make that building use safe for the surrounding area, which is a different question. And I think that, one, we have to rely on our contract with our operator and to make sure that we have a good operator in order to run the facility in a safe way, right? So I'm sure you all are all familiar with Food and Shelter. They do have a representative here tonight, but I can also talk to the specifics of the contract. The contract has evolved as we have gone through the iteration on 109 West Gray. In April, the Director of Food and Shelter has been very responsive to the city's request, even though they aren't actually a contract term, right? So if we've been getting complaints that, people are lining up outside too early or, something to that nature, we've been able to engage in conversations with the contractor, and she has been able to change the way that she operates the shelter in order to respond to those concerns from the city. Another, obviously, we know where the shelter is going to be because the city owns the building. I mean, we do have the police and fire protection services, but I think the main way that the city can guard against any health and safety issues is with the contract, with the contractor.
Can I follow up on that real quick? The existing contract that we have with the contractor actually specifies certain things from the city, such as on the Exhibit A, where it outlines the various things that the city is requiring of that contractor to be able to do. And there's some things that are really disturbing on that. And so I'd just like for us to go back and look at that and understand what the city is asking the contractor to do, and which talks about not looking for IDs, not understanding who the person is and if they're a felon or if they have a criminal background. Those are things that are concerning, I think, to the neighbors around a facility such as this. So.
And I think that kind of to answer your concern, in the nature of what is called a low barrier emergency shelter, typically, it doesn't require background checks. It doesn't require IDs. You're trying to, your target population are the most vulnerable, right? And the most vulnerable people in the community who are unhoused likely don't have IDs.
Understand.
Yeah, and so.
But also the church across the street also has a daycare.
Yeah.
So those are things I'm concerned about.
Can I ask a question? Can I follow up on your question? What's gained by having these requirements of not checking an ID? What's gained? Because I agree with you. There's a concern, and it's a legitimate concern. Is there something gained by not having requirements on checking IDs?
From my experience, I'm also a municipal court prosecutor who has talked to several people within the community, even outside that context. When you're unhoused, it's very difficult to keep a hold of your birth certificate, your ID. Let's say you're from another state, and even if you're not, I mean, ever since COVID, it's kind of been difficult to get those important documentations, right? A lot of the times, especially with the real ID requirements, it's very difficult to obtain that documentation without already having documentation. When your entire life, your entire property might live in a shopping basket, which you can't stay with 100% of the time, it is very difficult to keep those items safe, right? The most vulnerable of this community likely do not have those documents. They have nowhere to place those documents or to keep them safe, right? So that is a continuous struggle that the city has faced, and the city has tried to address that by hosting, ID fairs where we have, Department of Service Oklahoma, Social Security Administration, and, all those other agencies to get together. We were able to get them all their IDs in one fell swoop, then COVID happened, and now it's even more difficult to get those documents, right? So at the point where you're operating a low-barrier shelter, but you're asking for IDs, it is no longer a low-barrier shelter. Council has directed that the use specifically that they want is a low-barrier shelter, specifically for that population. So it is a trade-off, I will give you that, but that is in the nature of a low-barrier shelter. I will say, as far as the concerns regarding, I think, there was mention of a daycare. It is in the contract that they cannot give services to anyone who is a sex offender. You do still have to give some identifying information when you do come into the shelter. The City of Norman Police Department does maintain a list of sex offenders known to be within the community, which does include some people who are unhoused, and those all have photos associated with the individual person. I think, maybe one way, if this isn't already occurring, which it very well might be, is to provide an updated list every month to the shelter operator of those individuals who we know are in our community. That way they have those on hand when they're checking people in to make sure that no one slips through the crack. As I am aware of, we have not had any reports of that to date in any of the shelters that the city has owned or operated.
Can I follow up on my question? So how do you mitigate?
Michael, I'm just going to remind all of the fellow commissioners that we're here tonight to vote on the amendment and the rezoning of the transportation plan. I know there's lots of questions that surround this, and we want to make sure that we flesh all of those out, but just for sake of time and getting everybody's comments heard, if we can focus our questions on that. So proceed if you.
I think it's,
It
thank
falls
you, I
within that
appreciate
bucket.
the reminder. I think it's relevant. If you don't require an ID, but there is someone who's known to be violent, what are we doing right now that mitigates that? How do we manage that?
Like, are you asking specifically for people who are known to be violent?
Yes.
Without
an ID?
Without an ID, other than sex offenders?
Whatever.
I mean, there really is no way. We don't ask for, again, we don't do low barrier shelter. They don't typically do background checks in order to get access to overnight shelter services.
Thank you.
I have a question. Just the current location, is there any daycare or school in the same proximity as the proposed location?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Final questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to audience comments portion. I do want to remind everybody, if you do want to speak, I'll call you up individually. You'll have 3 minutes to share, and I will give you a warning when you get down to 30 seconds. And then we'll need you to wrap up your comments and allow the next person. Be sure to submit these. First name, last name, address. If you're currently unhomed, you can omit that, and we'll still go ahead and give you a call. And I'm going to do these in order that I have them. So first is Paul Wilson. Mr. Wilson, state your first name, last name, and address, please.
Paul Wilson, 401 12th Avenue Southeast in Ward 1. As far as the low barrier shelter goes, I'm just going to give you a little background. I was homeless at one point, and I did stay at a shelter. It did not require an ID. Obviously, I'm not any of the things that we're worried about, but I feel that if we can double the space from the current facility to this facility, it gets twice as many people off the street at night, gives them a safe place to sleep, receive services. I know this one will be directly across from the proposed Norman Regional 55-bed mental health facility that they are currently constructing right now, which is a good thing for anybody that's unhoused because they can get their treatment there. So as far as this facility goes, I understand it's a lot of money. I get it. I was at the study session listening in, and I wish we could use both floors, but unfortunately, we can only use the first floor within that budget. So as far as this facility goes, I hope you guys approve this rezoning. I know it's not a perfect location. I know it's only temporary. I know there's things down the pipeline where they could put a permanent shelter. But as long as we're moving in forward in the right direction as far as providing services for the most vulnerable, which I was once, I actually approve of this. I know it's a hot topic. I see it every day. I am a Uber driver by nature. I drive up and down Main Street a lot, especially on the weekends. And I'm going to tell you right now, as far as affecting businesses on Main Street with the West Gray Street location, if you're talking about patrons going there, Main Street's still packed every Friday night, Saturday night, even with the shelter at West Gray. So I don't think the restaurant next to it's going to be affected as much as people think, especially with all the patrons on this one going through that back entrance, not the front entrance, the back entrance, which is going to have that 8-foot concrete block wall.
Mr. Wilson, you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. And so, I mean, I don't see a problem with this, even if it is only temporary, till we find a permanent solution. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, next we have James Dragg. First name, last name, and address, if you don't mind, sir.
First name's James, last name's Dragg. I live at 222 East Frank, just down the street from the opposed site. And the site is less than 2 blocks away from 2 daycares and a grade school. And you go 4 blocks away, basically 5, say 6 blocks out, you got another couple grade schools. And I understand that, you know, people have problems, but even if they have this site, they're going to draw other people that are going to be hanging around that site. And, you know, you could fingerprint everybody that goes in that site, wouldn't do any good. And anytime they talk about temporary or change, it's devastating to everybody. I mean, I have rental property, and every time I got to give some lady going to OU with a daughter money back, she doesn't want to live in that area. I mean, it affects everybody. You know, I live along the WPA Creek, and they might not be doing anything there, but an 8-foot wall does not stop anybody. And I've had to pick syringes up out of that creek, and I'm right across the street from the church and a daycare. I mean, this is just ridiculous to move these people in there. I realize they have problems, but that's usually somebody that does something wrong. They're mentally disturbed or they have problems. I'm not saying everybody is, but it's just like asking for something to happen. And I just don't want to see it. I won't take my grandkids to the park over there because there's no telling what we'll find in the park. You know, Wilson School's right there. I won't even take him over to play in the playground because after a night, you don't know what you find in that playground. I've seen it firsthand. And granted, I know people have a problem going to the bathroom. There might be an emergency, but a lot of these people don't care. And if you want a good society and you want good family members and people in that neighborhood, you just have to say something. But it will affect all the businesses. Because I know it has affected mine. And every time it's temporary, we just affect everybody else again. Doesn't matter.
30 seconds left.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lynn Luke.
Lynn Luke, 328 North Crawford Avenue. I've heard a lot of talk about money, but no substantive answers. How is this going to get paid for? You've got renovations of this building. Who's going to pay for that? You've got all these services that are going to be provided. Who's paying for that? You've got gas, heating, your utilities, who's paying for that? Who's paying for the people to run this facility? If it's on the taxpayer, then I'm going to disagree, because I don't think as a taxpayer I should be subsidizing the lifestyle of the homeless. I think that the city needs to take a real hard look at this, and we need some definitive answers on the money. Who's paying for what? Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Alice Luck. Luke, you noted it here. Pronounced Luke. I apologize.
Alice Luke, Ward 4. My neighbors nearby 718 North Porter have valid concerns about their safety. The night of the League of Women's Voters mayoral debate, January 20th, 2022, there was a fatal shooting by an unhoused woman at the previous warming shelter at 325 East Comanche. 12 of my neighbors have been vandalized by unhoused vagrants. 5 have moved. 4 more are in the process of moving because their property and vehicle were vandalized by unhoused vagrants. My disabled brother had a knife put up to his throat by an unhoused man, Thomas Pacina, who came in uninvited through his kitchen door while I was on the phone with my brother. That man proceeded to threaten my life if I called the police when I kept calling my brother's name. When he became quiet, when I was calling my brother's name because he became quiet, I called the NPD, who were there in 5 minutes. Vagrants target soft, target senior citizens, disabled, and the naive. An unhoused woman told me recently that vagrants even target other unhoused. Unhoused stole my disabled brother's house key and came into his home while he was sleeping, tampered with his medication, leading to an over 2-month hospital stay that my brother never completely recovered from. My brother had to go into nursing care since his home was destroyed by vagrant squatters, including but not limited to causing to become infested with bed bugs. He has since passed away. The previous senior citizen man those vagrant squatters targeted passed away as well. I think this facility could be better utilized as a handicap-accessible indoor recreation center for children to play ping pong, pool, chess, etc. board games with healthy concessions and a jukebox to play music without violent overtures. Such a facility existed in Oklahoma City when I was in 5th grade, and we all loved it. 5th grade through high school who typically utilized the facility. Norman is a trendsetter city, and such a low barrier facility is needed if and only if
Ms.
treatment
Luke, you
is
have 30
provided
seconds.
and rules followed with penalties if not, such as being escorted out the first time I ever spoke here for being out of order. You do have to start someplace, yes, a handicap-accessible place without bus and cab service, and instead a shuttle service better facilitates recovery for individuals. Rural settings have proven quite therapeutic for people
Ms. Luke,
choosing the
thank-
12-step program to
for sharing.
recovery. I think that's it.
Thanks
Did
for sharing.
I go over?
By 5 seconds, you're fine. Thank you for
Okay.
sharing.
I just wanted to add this. It is not incumbent on Ward 4 to approve of
Luke,
718 North Porter
Ms. Luke.
being a low barrier shelter.
Excuse me.
To prove we are Christians or good
All right,
people.
thank you.
Thank you.
So we do want to limit our time to 3 minutes to share. Mr. Brad Worcester? Worcester?
Thank you and good evening. Brad Worcester, 132 North Santa Fe. I'm speaking to you this evening as the president of the Norman Downtowners Association. Our board of directors met earlier this week, and our position on these items has not changed. We adamantly protest locating low-barrier shelters in downtown Norman. Both the existing shelter at 109 West Gray Street and this proposed shelter at 718 North Porter are inappropriate locations. We urge the city of Norman to identify a more appropriate shelter location before permanently damaging the economic viability, attractiveness, and vibrancy of our downtown. Please protect downtown Norman and reject the proposed land use plan amendment and zoning change for 718 North Porter. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Mr. John Scamehorn?
Which mic? This one?
Yeah, just first name, last name, and address, please.
I am Dr. John Scamehorn. I live at 701 Grill Avenue. I've lived in Ward 1 for 42 years. I'm a retired chemical engineer. We as a community must decide how best to invest our money to maximize economic development, job creation, and protection of our citizens, persons, and property. In terms of investing in our future, support of public safety and schools is obviously crucial. Providing shelter for the unhoused has developed as a key arguing point in Norman, as those who think like me what I call the common sense approach, opposed to those who want to provide services for the needy without regard to the effect on business or residents who generate the taxes to pay for services. We see the result of this latter philosophy in cities like Seattle, Portland, New York. It's a long list you all know well. Why would Norman go down this suicidal path? With respect to the proposed homeless shelter on North Porter, a restaurant generating over $500,000 a year in sales tax will likely close if this shelter opens. It sounds like an economic development plan designed by a maniac. An argument made about location of a shelter is that residents need to be near services. For some homeless, this means near fruitful panhandling areas. Panhandling has a negative impact on both those begging and those giving. Panhandling is a prime source of drug money for the unhoused, as described by Councilmember Ball. Desire of citizens to help the needy is destroyed by abuse. Near my house, on the east side, a couple is frequently panhandling, using a child and a dog as to entice people to give money, thinking that funds will be used to feed the child or the dog. This is abuse of the generosity of Normanites and reduces the willingness to help needy in general. There's a basic conflict between those homeless who find panhandling a more productive way to get cash than a job, and hardworking citizens who don't want or deserve to be harassed. I think a shelter should be located out of town, perhaps near Purcell, in the best interest of the city of Norman. The ultimate goal is to see each unhoused person integrate into society.
You have 30 seconds left.
I want to see them holding a job, paying rent or a mortgage. It sounds cruel, but it needs to be more attractive for the unhoused to get a job than stay on the dole. Denying panhandling opportunities is something we can do to help, and building a homeless shelter somewhere more remote from shopping or schools or residences than North Porter is in the best interest of the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. Steve Ladner?
Steve Ladner, 501 South Lahoma, Ward 4, been a resident of Ward 4 40 years. I just wanted to add a few things to it. 3 years ago, August 2020, we voted down, the citizens of Norman voted not to spend bond money for a homeless shelter, but yet 3 years later, we've spent $1.6 million. It could be as much as $3 million for this facility. Why isn't the city of Norman, if they want a permanent, why don't they look for a facility? They've had 3 years to do that. Now we're on our fourth temporary shelter. Everywhere those have been, they're blighted. Drive down Gray Street from the post office east down to Main or Porter. There's no offices anymore. There's no people living in those areas. Same going from Main Street north to Robinson. Many, many vacant buildings. They always become blighted. And in terms of this, I can't imagine this is the solution the city proposes. This man, if we just take Tar Mars, who's been in business 23 years, he started from scratch, he employs 50 people. He generates actually over $600,000 in sales tax. So the city's solution is to cannibalize successful businesses, use their own tax revenue to shut him down. I have no doubt that if you put a homeless shelter next to his business, it will destroy his business and he'll be forced to close. Drive down Porter. It is getting very blighted. So I am strongly opposed to it. I think the city is entirely going in the wrong direction. If they truly want a permanent shelter, there's nobody in this room that doesn't want to help people, but we also want them to help themselves and be in a position to do so. And putting a Band-Aid on it every 6 months, again, 4 shelters, this is the 4th shelter in 2 to 3 years. It's a waste of money. They've got to have better solutions. They've got to be more creative and come up with something that actually works. They've had 3 years to come up with an idea where to put a permanent shelter that will work. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Sherilyn Denso?
Greetings and good evening, Planning Commission and residents and guests. I've lived in Norman for 46 years. I moved here with a backpack when I was 21. I couch surfed on friend's couch and immediately got a job working in a little restaurant, waiting tables, you know, doing what I could in the kitchen down on Campus Corner. I've also owned property. I own 2 properties, actually. I own property within the 350-foot circle of this proposed shelter. And I own property and live in Ward 6. So I lived in 4 for 11 years, and I've lived in 6 for the rest of my 46 years here in Norman. During that time, I've seen lots of changes within the old silk stocking. I've gone to battle with the Planning Commission before to preserve the neighborhood in the old silk stocking neighborhood. I've seen the houses destroyed and parking lots built for the commercial. Now you want to change from commercial to industrial on this particular piece of property. It just seems like there was more, I don't know, a lot more thought process put into the 2025 plan, which is a good plan, which I didn't agree with everything in that plan, but it was something that the residents in that area could live with. And now you're wanting to inundate us with even more problems. You haven't heard all the stories of the crime, the individual stories in the core neighborhoods. It's the tip of the iceberg here. There are some stories that people don't want to share for fear of retribution by other people, or that their businesses will be harmed by speaking out. So I know that lots of businesses down on Norman and Main Street.
You have 30 seconds.
And I've been accosted over and over and over in that area downtown because I'm not afraid to walk the streets, having grown up in New York City. However, I am accosted almost every day by somebody. And I know the businesses are suffering, and there are many, many, many people that won't come to Art Walk anymore. Friends of mine that were accosted while we were on Art Walk.
Thank you. Catherine Bruce.
Hi, I'm Catherine Bruce, 719 East Rich Street, where my family has been for 70 years. I think some misconception about the low barrier shelter being a better thing, you know, a better thing than high barrier or whatever, but at 7 a.m., no matter who they are, they turn them out on the street. And I live directly between the proposed location and Food and Shelter for Friends. So these people are just going through the neighborhood like snakes. That I've had 3 different times, this is all this year, that they try to set up tents right outside my bedroom window. And I call the police, and the police, oh, well, we can't do this, we can't do that. And then I call the church for the property owner, and they're like, well, what would Jesus do? But in the meantime, there are unhoused men living in tents outside my bedroom window. Earlier, like 3 weeks ago, a Sunday afternoon, I'm sitting in my living room. Here comes a man flailing his arms like this, running down my driveway. He tries to get in my back gate. He tries to get in my north door. He gets in the gate on my front porch, and he's coming towards me, and I'm so scared, and I don't have weapons. But I just stepped to the door and screamed. That's all I could do. And he went out there and stood a minute. Then he fell over flat and started having a seizure. This whole time I'm on the phone with 911 because I'm scared to death. So that's what I'm saying about the low barrier. It just puts all these people at 7 a.m. out on the street in our neighborhoods. And every one of these shelters that you've had so far are within 1 mile of my house. I'm a 70-year-old low-income woman. I am vulnerable in this community, and I ask for your support. And, I'm just trying to hold on here. And we can't keep putting all the shelters in my neighborhood. Everybody wants to be compassionate, fine. Find a shelter and put it on the west side, and then see who's going to be.
You have 30 seconds.
That's right. See who wants to support that. So, that's really, I'm terrified. Ever since Food and Shelter went in, and I'm between there and Salvation Army, I've had this trouble. And I live way off of the city street. I live a block away. When my family bought that property, there were only 2 houses in that section. So they built up around
Thanks
me.
for sharing. Thank you.
Okay.
Ginger Hall.
Well, low barrier. If all else fails, guys, take a picture, and the fingerprints still work. Ask any lawman. They can find out really bad people that way. 2700 24th Avenue Northeast. I'm sorry, I didn't get that far before.
Can you adjust your mic down just a little bit?
Beg your pardon?
Pull that mic down just a little bit. There you go.
How's that?
That's great.
Yay, okay. And I'm sorry about the allergies. I sound funny, I can't help it. I've been where I'm at for 42 years. I try not to mess with people, but I keep running out of things like milk. I come to town, I go to a store, I go to Brahms, I go for food, wherever I go. It's somebody wanting money from me. They want a cigarette, they want a ride, they want to know what I'm doing, they want to know why I won't give them $20. We are all being accosted every time we leave our homes. I'm lucky they can't find my home. I'm in a pasture and I'm staying there. It's ridiculous. My friends, my relatives, everybody is constantly under attack by these people. We don't get a break. I don't care where we go. Northeast, go to Brahms. Go hang out at Brahms for a while on Porter. It's a nightmare. We're scared to death of this shelter. It's not all just homeless people. A lot of these people are not homeless. They're just seriously drug addicted little leeches that have taken over our city. And they don't care if you're old. They don't care if you've got kids with you. They're urinating on Main Street in broad daylight. Nobody says a word about it. This is germy. Even if you're not offended and you think, oh, it's a sex thing. No, it's a germ thing too. That these people, we got to do something. Please don't put any more of them right in our backyard. And since you guys are planners, you need to plan probably for like a bigger jail, mental places. We need help. Please listen to these people. They're not here because they're bored. Everybody has somewhere they'd rather be tonight. And we're sorry to bother you guys with this, but please listen to us. It's dangerous out there. I'm telling you, we cannot go take care of everyday business. The bank, the store, anywhere, without being under siege. So please, don't let somebody get killed. Don't let a bunch of people get killed. I don't want to see Norman just become the laughingstock of the nation over this. But we're losing our city. We need help. You guys
You
can
have
help.
30 seconds left.
That's okay. Thank you for your time, and I think more of you folks after being here tonight than I did before. You do seem to be kind of getting it, and you're asking good questions. Thank you very much. Please protect the citizens.
All right, thanks for sharing. Lauren Foster? We have a Lauren Foster?
Hi, I'm Lauren Donaldson. My husband and I and our two little boys live within the 350 square feet around this property. I just kind of wanted to remind you guys that, and everybody here, this is just to vote on the rezoning. This is not even to say that this is what they're going to use with this property. I think that a lot of people are really scared, and a lot of times when people are scared, they kind of revert to stereotypes and things like that. But if you've actually taken the time to talk with anybody who works with the unhoused or who has been trying to advocate to doing more, right now the shelter that they have on Gray Street is not big enough. They are constantly turning people away, and there is a great need for this facility in Norman. So whether it's here or somewhere else, I know that the people who are wanting to put it here, this is not their ideal location. They want to be able to put it somewhere else. They want to go ahead and start a more permanent location, but there aren't any locations. I've talked with former ward council member for Ward 4. My husband has talked with Helen Grant. We've reached out to caravans. We've talked to as many people as we can. Yes, we have two little boys, and there's a lot of scary things being said out there, but the more people that I've talked to that work with these unhoused, they're not violent offenders. They're not sex offenders. They're just people trying to find shelter. The thing about the birth certificates and the social security numbers, I've personally seen people try really hard with the Real ID. That's an issue. And if they have a safe place to stay overnight where they're not worried that something's going to be stolen from them, during the day they're trying to go to make their appointments to maybe get new birth certificates, new driver's license. But they can't do anything right now unless this zoning thing is fixed. So it's not saying that this is where it's going to be. We have to do the zoning thing first. And as the lawyer, I'm sorry, I can't remember what your name was saying before, there's also lots of other uses that can happen with this particular zoning thing. This is not an ideal permanent location, but I can tell you that there's already unhoused in the neighborhood anyway. They've never once bothered me or my family. I've lived in my house for 10 years, and I've never had an issue. I know that that's not the case for everyone, but if we don't help by trying to get these people taken care of, it's not going to get any better.
You have 30 seconds.
So I just would like for everybody to try to do their own research, talk with people if you have questions, and not just resort to stereotypes, because these are just people too, and they need help.
Thank you. Evan Foster?
My name is Evan Foster, the 312 East Rich Street. We do live within the 350 feet, and I would just like to echo what Mr. Wilson said at the beginning, that having a place as a home base helps out a lot. And I agree with most everybody here that this is not an ideal location, but it is a location to start with. Whether it's temporary and turns into permanent, that's several years down the road. That's more council and planning meetings, I assume. So there's more to be thought about this as we go along. But if the first step is just to rezone this, then that's a step I think we should take. And if it allows more people to come in at night and not be out on the street, then that is for the better of the city of Norman and the rest of the neighborhood, to get them in a place where they can get help and they can use the services that are located around there. It's hard being, unhoused, and the more help that people need and a place to sleep at night, the better. And if this is the step to get that process going, then we can't just keep kicking the can down the road into the next neighborhood or into the next neighborhood. But there is no perfect answer, but maybe this is at least one answer. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Lori Swan?
My name is Laurie Swan, and I'm homeless. I put my mailing address on my sheet. That's the address for the Women's Sanctuary. I have been living since early June at the shelter on Gray Street, and I can honestly say it has probably saved my life. I had my home sold at sheriff's sale on June 5th, and they came and they asked me to leave my home. I put whatever I could in my car. I spent 2 nights sleeping in my car until I found out about the friend's house. I went there, and I at least had a place to sleep at night. I had a severe anxiety disorder. Through the friend's house, I got referrals to Community Mental Health Center, where I have been able to, I have a caseworker who is helping me to get widow's benefits for Social Security. They're helping me deal with some legal problems that I have that will eventually enable me to get my own housing and be on my own 2 feet. Most importantly, I'm getting treatment for my anxiety. Before I went to friend's house and they gave me all the referrals to the places where I needed to get help, I would not be able to stand here and speak to you as I am now. The people at the Women's Sanctuary are already in the neighborhood where the new shelter is being proposed. I go there most days during the day, and I like the women there are not drug addicts. They're not alcoholics. They're just people that don't have any other place to go during the day. And the same thing is true with the people at Friend's house. The rules are strict there. We have to check in by 6 o'clock. Between 6 and 10 o'clock, we're allowed to come and go, but we have to be in at 10 and the doors are locked.
You have 30 seconds, Ms. Swan.
Thank you. I just want to say that somebody with severe drug or alcohol problems would not be able to hack the rules there. They would either be asked to leave because they violated them, or they would leave voluntarily because those rules do not support what some people think are the homeless lifestyle.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you for allowing me.
Brad Goodman?
Brad Goodman, 300.5 East Main Street. The current shelter location on West Gray has negatively impacted businesses in the downtown area. That over 100 downtown business and/or property owners recently submitted a petition to the city asking the city to move it. The city's solution to those problems of moving the shelter to 718 North Porter is puzzling because the North Porter location is not only very close to businesses, but is also much closer to homes, churches, and schools than the current location. The shelter on North Porter will not only increase the problems described in the petition for nearby businesses, it will also create many new problems for nearby residences. Also, it's approximately 1,700 feet, 6 blocks from downtown,
So there will be very little benefit to downtown from moving it to Porter, but only expand the issues. The shelter location proposed is at too close proximity to residential neighborhood to be a good choice. At least businesses can possibly change schedules or do other items that can avoid issues. But residences, especially in this neighborhood, will not have that luxury. The Porter Road construction, when completed, will in time help revitalize the commercial corridor that we who own property along Porter have worked very hard to do that. And the residential area surrounding 718 North Porter has had a lot of infill construction lately, and a lot of major remodeling of existing housing has been done lately. Please do not stop or jeopardize that momentum. With the couple $1 million apparently available, I think the city could do significantly less damage to the community by relocating the shelter to a different location. Until that time, please leave it where it is until a more suitable location than 718 North Porter can be found. Thank you.
Thank you. Trip Hall?
Good evening. I'm Trip Hall from 627 Classen Boulevard. This situation with the homeless is all of our problems, and we've just got to get together to solve it. But this facility is not going to be the solution. At our home at 627 South Classen, both of our cars have been molested. Our yard has been torn up, defecation in our front lawn, and this is at Classen and Alameda. We own the building at 501 East Alameda. All of our windows have been busted out by the homeless. The police have a long record of this. Defecation in our own buildings. We've even had to lock the public restrooms in that facility, which is open to the public, in insurance agencies there and several other offices. 310 West, we own the gray building there. Again, the problems have been countless. We have had defecation, windows busted, homeless sleeping in front of the doors, and none of us have been able to find a solution. The police have been helpful. The city is trying to work with us. We at RJH Realty, who own these properties, we want to work with all of you and the citizens here in this room. I agree, there are some success stories. Right here is one. But this facility is not going to work in our neighborhood. Terra Mahara's is a restaurant that we all love. That is not going to be a place that we can go and enjoy like we used to. It's a family-friendly, all-age welcome restaurant. Sonic across the street, Boomerang down. We need to keep these. As they said, the corridor here on Porter is just about to be finished, and the excitement of all this newness is going to be great. There is a solution to this problem. All of us here are vested to do that. But our hope is that this facility is not a waste of our taxpayer dollars and our time. Let's work on something like the Day Center for the Homeless in Tulsa, or some examples in Oklahoma City, where we can actually find facilities that are actually working. These are already up and running. And those people will be happy to visit with any of us about the success in which they've had. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlinda Gravel?
Hi, thank you, Planning Commission. Carlinda Gravel, 410 North Ponca Avenue. I'd like to take a moment to look over your master plan. Let's start by the dumpster and the trash enclosures that will be at 718. So one of the things, will this dumpster be dealt with like a medical dumpster? It's my understanding that the facility now has some problems with bed bugs, body lice, head lice, things of that nature. So anything that could be hazardous to the community, will that be dealt with at this dumpster? Secondly, I'd like to ask in regards to the landscaping. Our own City Hall is having to remove some of the landscaping due to the nature of behaviors that are occurring around that landscaping. There's lots of needles being found around our city depending on the landscaping that's being used. I think it's really important that we take that into consideration as we take into consideration people can hide behind there and do all kinds of paying businesses. So I'd also point out that the fencing on this 8-foot tall masonry fence, are people going to be allowed to sit up on top of that? Is that going to be a structure? Because if it's at all possible, I'm sure we will see that. I'd also like to ask on the summary request where it says they may connect with a caseworker. This is not a requirement. They are not obligated to seek treatment or any kind of resources from a caseworker. That is optional. So if people choose to just come to this facility, sleep and leave, they are so allowed to stay in their present circumstances. Also, I'd like to point out that the proposed change will not be contrary to the public interest. I don't understand how that's possible considering what you've heard already. I'd also point out that on number 2, it says that there's a behavioral health hospital nearby, which we already have one, by the way, and I see people who are in mental health crisis all the time where I live. We also have a senior wellness center nearby, which actually would put our seniors at risk. We also have lots of facility. Long-established medical care is supposed to be a plus for this. We've had Norman Regional this whole time, readily available, and we still are having the issues we're having. I'd also point out that restaurants, pharmacies, miscellaneous retails are going to have a negative impact.
30 seconds left.
Yes. So Trinity, that has been mentioned in this, also has a children's facility. According to the statement of purpose, superior built environment brought about through unified development and provide for design ingenuity and development while protecting existing and future surrounding areas in achieving goals, the health and safety and welfare of the community.
Ms. Gravel, thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much for your time.
Next, we have Chelsea Gravel.
Thank you, Planning Commission. I'm Chelsea Gravel. I live at 410 North Ponca. The current shelter at 109 West Gray is roughly 700 feet from Andrews Park and the Children's Library across the street. Just because it's difficult, we shouldn't move a bad location to another bad location. Council has said in a study session that if it's not perfect, it will be made permanent. That if it is perfect, it will be made permanent. I've been told by council that I should not walk down the sidewalk where the existing shelter is currently, because it is not safe to walk to my post office. Will the 60 to 100 guests staying at this new facility be allowed to smoke cigarettes? Even though I won't be able to see them, it will still ruin the smell of my businesses and Tara Mahara's located right next door. This is severely affecting our downtown area. Elderly and women are choosing not to go down there. They're choosing to shop elsewhere. I've been followed 4 times, making me scared to go outside in my own yard. I'm scared to walk. And a lieutenant said, as this shelter comes in, it'll only get worse since I live 3 blocks away. If you build it, they will come. We don't have the numbers to provide this need. This is great for our entire community, all of the United States. We can't cover this being a small town, a small community. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Maggie Jablonski.
I'm Maggie Jablonski, 301 Ridge Lake Boulevard. So, I would like to start by stating that I currently do not live near where the homeless shelter is being planned on building. While understanding how much stress and worry can happen for the people who live close because of personal reasons and protection, I also understand that these homeless people need a home as well. And by giving them this opportunity, we are helping them build their courage to get back up on their feet and get jobs and houses in Norman. While knowing that this may draw back business from local shops, I understand both opinions, and I remember being scared at first and worried about how this might affect me, but I realize they are people too. But I also know that if we follow this plan, we can not only benefit the homeless population and help them feel safe as citizens of Norman, but also benefit Norman as well. I know personally my family has helped the homeless before. We have always felt comfortable, and although we are worried, we realize they are there too. All in all, it doesn't matter who you are, what your job is, or where you live. Every person in Norman needs to matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Johnny Driscoll?
I'm Johnny Driscoll, 1349 Regent Street, Norman, Oklahoma. Been here many, many years. I have 3 generations of children here with grandbabies. Every one of them have experienced visually sexual acts, showers and naked in their yard with water hoses. And we're not trying to say we hate homeless people. I could end up there one day. But there has to be a solution of the way they're going at this. And just like the gentleman that was up here directing this, telling you the financial end of it and the economic end of it, they know nothing. They don't live there. They don't see it every day. Their children don't come home with syringes from the skate park, sexual acts in your front yard in front of a 14-year-old granddaughter. And it's numerous issues. And it's not a hate issue. It's a problem that needs to be solved. And the way they're trying to solve it, okay, let's just magically say we're going to try this place temporarily. Doesn't anybody have a plan? Can't they slow this down so our families aren't affected? Tara Mahara's restaurant, my favorite. They're in a nightmare. Boomerang, the friends or managers are my friends. They're in a nightmare. Checkers, a nightmare. People riding around with machetes, on their bikes, half naked. People asking me if I want to have sex that aren't even half dressed in front of the restaurant. It's ridiculous. Somebody has to have a solution. Homeless people aren't horrible. Some of them are bad. Somebody needs to look at the issues to protect our children and our families and our businesses. That is all I have to say. Somebody needs to step up.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you.
Dr. Cynthia Rogers?
Cynthia Rogers, 633 Reed Avenue, Ward 4. And I don't live in this immediate neighborhood, but I live about 6/10 of a mile from Food and Shelter. And I lived, I don't know, football field away from the Mattoon camp that was closed down. So my neighborhood has been impacted by homelessness, but not in a way that's bothered me, and certainly not to the extent that immediate neighbors are. This evening, I'd like to invite everybody to read a book called Homelessness is a Housing Problem. It's at the Pioneer Library System, and I think this book will help dispel a lot of the myths and misperceptions about homelessness. In that book, there's a citing of some literature by Lai and Latterman, and they talk about the costs of homelessness. So there's been a lot of talk about costs to businesses, costs for the shelter. Well, there's costs to not having a shelter. There are costs for people not having a safe place to sleep, not having a place to be during the day. So there are serious consequences to the individuals living on the streets themselves, early death, they're sicker, they have more ER visits, more victimization from, criminals on the streets, abuse, mental health issues, and child and youth have long-term negative impacts. And the community has costs as well. Services that we provide, ER, police, prison, parole, courts. These authors estimated, a wide range, $30,000 to $100,000 per individual in their study, the costs of a homeless person to a community. There's also costs of guilt, fear, and NIMBYism. And then there's costs of responses when people just want to hide or punish homeless folks. And then the discussions about, well, it's bad for business. is there we have this cost of, are we putting money ahead of human dignity? I will tell you that we are much safer having individuals sleeping in a shelter
You have 30 seconds left.
than roaming the streets. Because if they're in a shelter and they're sleeping, they're there at 10, they're not breaking into your home. I think we've heard good stories tonight about what happens when people don't have a safe place to be, when they're not connected to services, when they don't have hope. So I'm in support of this, not perfect, but I think it's a better solution. It's not a solution, but it's an improvement over the current location because of access to the hospital across the street. There will be an ER place there.
Dr. Rogers, thanks for sharing.
Got it. Thank you.
Dr. Steve Ellis.
Stephen Ellis, 633 Reed Avenue. I was hoping that the focus of our discussion tonight would be about what the shelter should look like. It should focus on unhoused Normans and the needs that they have, because they're really the most needy people in the community, right? So, which is why I greatly appreciate the comments by people who have experienced homelessness and who also have experienced what the shelter is like. But many people here seem to want to focus on issues that deal with the house, so let's do that for a minute. A subset of the housed people, and many of them are here tonight, seem to be really concerned about, and concerned in the sense, or worried about, and not in the sense of concern, but in the sense of fear about where unhoused people are, where they hang out and where they sleep. And that should just strike you as strange, because we generally don't think about subgroups of the committee and trying to sort of track them throughout the day, right? So, they don't track academics in Norman. I can pretty much go wherever I want. I don't even need to show an ID for anything like that. They let lawyers roam the streets, right? Which, if you're going to worry about, people who might be causing problems, that's actually a good one to think about. So why are the unhoused distinguished here? It's because people are afraid. And I think that's true, that they are afraid. And I think that's something that we need to recognize and think about. But the question is really whether or not that fear is justified. Cynthia Rogers is my wife, so I live really, really close to the homeless services, right? So I live on Reed Avenue, just south of where Food and Shelter for Friends is, right across the street from Community Health, really close to where Mattoon is. We're actually really close to Tarahumara's as well. So we live in this neighborhood. Homeless people walk my streets. I've been stopped by the police myself because I look like a homeless person sometimes. So it's not the best thing. But what I've learned is that this concern, this fear about homelessness, is really a matter of overbreadth. When you hear incidents where people are afraid, oftentimes nothing really happened, right? And there are lots of communities that have lots of people who are troublesome. Now, I'm not saying homeless people are saints, because they're not.
You have 30 seconds left.
But it's important to realize that as a city, we really can't cognize just the fact that there are people in the community who we're scared of, who happen to belong to a particular kind of group. We got to treat people as individuals, and at the level of individuals, having more shelter prevents more victimization. It's better for more people if we're able to help the neediest people in our community. So I hope you'll think about that.
Thanks for sharing. Jeanette Coker. Yes, ma'am, I did.
I'm Jeanette Coker, 418 East Hubert. I hear all these stories, and I agree, but I'll tell you my story. I've lived in Norman for a long time. I raised my children on the west side. But when one of my daughters, who lives on the east side, had her first baby, I moved to the east side, 600 block of East Main Street. I needed to see that baby. I couldn't, it just took me too long to drive all the way across town every time I needed to rock that baby boy. But it was a whole new world over there. The houses were closer together with people sitting on the porches instead of everybody being in their backyard barbecuing. Things were much more neighborly. I really loved it over there. And then we got food and shelter. Life went downhill over time. Now we have shopping carts left in our yards and in our driveways. People walking around screaming profanities, stealing. You've heard all the stories and you know it's true. Anyway, last February, I moved to my daughter's house and things were a little better. It was north of Main Street. But now my quality of life is being threatened. A homeless shelter right down the street. And I've got a map and it shows that I'm just right there. Please don't destroy all these businesses and lower the values of all of our homes in this area. And remember, this area is home to a large percentage of Norman's elderly population.
Ms. Coker, you have 30 seconds left.
Okay. I'm just asking you, please don't forward this with a yes. Please forward it to the council with a no. I'm going to pass out maps to show you just how close I am, because I will be affected.
Thank you for sharing. While she's passing those out, does any member of the commission need to take a break?
Yes.
Yes,
So we can
please.
take a quick bathroom break. We're about halfway through, I believe, so.
Okay.
10 minutes, so be back at 8:50. 8:50. All right, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, we're going to carry on, be respectful of everybody's time. We're going to try to facilitate this. Could Mr. Patrick Lane?
Patrick Lane with the law firm Baltimore Slow here on behalf of Tara Humaras and a couple of other businesses who wish to remain anonymous in the area. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, but what we haven't talked about is what is required for an amendment to the plan. And so, first of all, for any proposed change to the plan, there's supposed to be a complete impact analysis. And if I heard Mr. Pernton correctly, they don't know what the economic impact the city as the applicant is going to be for the businesses around. So they have not done a complete analysis of the impact of this proposed change yet. And so that, for that reason alone, there shouldn't be an amendment. But even if we look beyond that, the plan is supposed to govern how capital funds are used, right? That's the whole purpose of the 2025 plan. And one of the main goals of that is managed growth. And one of the policies that supports managed growth is balanced development on the east and west side of Norman, right? And so how, and what has not been explained, is how moving the shelter from West Gray to 718 Porter balances and encourages economic growth on the east side. I think all of the business owners who are around West Gray now would tell you that it does not. And so for that goal and that policy would be violated by moving this particular shelter to 718 Porter. But the two requirements that are in the plan for any sort of amendment are a change in circumstances resulting from development of properties in the general vicinity. That has not even been discussed tonight. What change in circumstances in the vicinity of 718 Porter justify the amendment to the plan that is being sought here? Without that, and that is a requirement, not a suggestion. They have to meet that requirement in order to amend the plan, which is what they're trying to do tonight. The second one is a determination that the proposed change would not result in adverse land use. I think all of the business owners downtown would say that this is an adverse land use. And I think that if a determination has been made, I didn't hear it tonight. And so none of the requirements for the amendment to the plan have been met. And so it can't move forward, and it should not move forward. And Mr. Romero will tell you about his experiences as of today without the shelter actually being next door to Tara Humaras. But for just purposes of the legal stuff that, I know, even being a degenerate lawyer walking around the streets of Norman like I am.
You have 30 seconds left.
They haven't been met, and we can't ignore that the plan that is supposed to be governing our city requires certain things in order to amend it, which is what they're trying to do tonight. They haven't met those requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Romero? Train Romero?
Efren Romero, 702 North Porter. That's my address on my business, but I live there, so I just should give you that address. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. I'm very concerned of what's going to happen on my business and what's going to happen next when the shelter will be open there. Seems to me that 23 years of hard work, dedication, sacrifice are going to go into the trash. I currently employ 50 employees in my business. I started out with 7. I have 50, and they all have families and children. They're all full-timers. We pay $1.8 million worth of payroll a year. And I think it's going to be affected in big time. My thinking about what is going to be the bigger damage of it, I think my business is going to start going down. A lot of people is not going to go. We had, as bad as it is already, we had so many problems with people vandalizing customers' card, asking for money, bugging, trashing, littering, peeing, doing necessities in our patio, and by a dumpster also. We have to clean up every day with soap and water and chemicals. to be able to get all that stuff out. And as bad as it is, I think it's going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. So please, trying to help us out. This is being a big issue for us, and sometimes I don't even sleep because 23 years of work and sacrifice, it's not easy. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Richard Tortorello? Okay. Michael Selby?
I'm Michael Selby. I moved here about 7 years ago, and I live at 318 East Ottawa Street. When I first moved here, I lived on Rebecca Lane, over off of Lindsay Street, and it wasn't real bad over there. But then I moved over to East Ottawa Street, and since I've been there the last 3 years, I've noticed a homeless problem. Well, what I don't understand is you see these people pushing shopping carts, pushing them up and down the sidewalks every day, piled full of junk. They throw their trash out in my yard. I have to clean it up. I've caught one of them peeing on my grandkids' toys out in the backyard. I've had them stealing stuff out of my front yard off of my girlfriend's flowers and stuff like that. Caught them stealing stuff off of there. Okay. Right off the bat, they're pushing shopping carts, so that right there makes them a thief. Because them shopping carts, you don't buy shopping carts when you go to Walmart, do you? You have to steal them if you're taking a shopping cart, so why are they not going to jail if nothing else? Why don't the city press charges against it or make it illegal to push a shopping cart down the sidewalk? You can buy little wagons you can pull. So, if you done that right there, eventually, if you're arresting them for the shopping carts, have a crew to come behind the cops, dump that shopping cart, take it back to wherever it come from. I've been doing it myself with my truck. Every time I see a shopping cart sitting, I pick it up, I dump it in the dumpster, and I take it back to Walmart or wherever it come from. You go to this park over here. I try to take my grandson down here to this park. He's 2 years old. He loves playing on slides and stuff. Well, what have we got underneath this little shelter over here by the kids' toys? 15, 20 homeless people with tents set up? Is it going to be okay for me to set a camper up out here in this field and live without having to pay my rent, $750 a month? To listen to these people walk in front of my house, cussing, my grandkid sitting there trying to wave at him because he don't know no better. Why are you letting this go on? These people trash out your city. It makes me want to move out of this place. This is probably one of the nastiest places I've ever lived. But, of course, I did grow up in the country. But, there's a whole lot of more things that I could come up with. And one, you had this guy talking about this thing earlier that they was building down here at 40 acres by the Walmart off of Classen. Why don't you build your homeless shelter down there instead of wasting $1.2 million up here? You could build a building for $1.2 million down there. Could you not? Why waste tax money whenever you got plenty of better places to put it?
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate it. Monica Manadio.
Hi, I'm Monica Manadio. I live at 720 North Peters, right next door to Wilson Elementary that has been talked about tonight, as well as Trinity Baptist, that has also been mentioned, and about 2 blocks from the location and from Terra Hamaras. Being a homeowner and also a Norman Public Schools teacher since 1997, I've also grown up in Norman. My whole family has grown up here for many years. I love our community. I want good things for our community. I have served this community in many aspects, between United Way. I actually worked with all of the social service organizations in Norman who did help homeless and all of our unfortunate community members. I believe in all of that, all of these things that they have been saying. I truly believe we do need to help these people, absolutely. That being said, I'm raising teenage daughters in my house. I deal with the same things many of these homeowners have talked about. I don't necessarily feel threatened or scared. Nobody has hurt us or anything along those lines. However, there is a lot of foot traffic. There's a lot of people already going by often, and I think this is just going to increase that. I worry about the elementary school next door. I worry about the daycare right next door to that. I don't think people walking by those locations throughout the day is safe, nor is it a good idea. I do think we need something. I just don't feel like that is the ideal location. I know there's not an ideal location, but I really don't believe, and I can't support being here. Tara Ramirez, he is a wonderful man. He has done wonderful things for our community. He has employed many of my high school students who really needed them. He supports them. He takes care of his employees. They are wonderful people, and I'm just a customer, and I feel like attached to them like their family. And I do worry about how that's going to also affect him and other businesses in that area. So I love this town.
You have 30
My
seconds.
heart is here. I don't want to go anywhere else, but I really don't want this in this area. I just don't believe that that's the place. So.
Thanks for sharing. Floyd Carroll. Okay. Adam Ross.
Thank you, Adam Ross, 3308 Winchester Circle. I'm really quite honestly undecided about this as a location, but I would like to address a couple of things. The theory that providing services just encourages more homelessness, and so refusing to provide those services to solve homelessness. A lot of people actually don't have the means to leave Norman. I met a guy who was like 40-something, and I was shocked when he told me he had never been out of the city of Norman. That being said, let's not be insane about our compassion to the homeless. Let's still be hard on crime. Let's not discredit real fears that the people here tonight have. We can't just disregard valid concerns because that just leads to more divisiveness. If this location doesn't work, let's figure something else out because the stakes are life and death for a lot of people. The only other thing I wanted to mention to everyone here, regardless of whether we are going to help the homeless, we have no choice but to look at the cause. You can listen to nightly news and believe it's 100% a drug problem all you want, but it really is about housing. And what we are witnessing is the culmination of our lack of supply due to zoning nearly everything in our city as R1, single family. None of us here who want to speak on homelessness really have any business opposing higher density housing. If you genuinely want to prevent people having to live on the street, your friends and family, support any new infill housing that comes to council. And when anyone says higher density, everyone panics and thinks that you want high rises everywhere. And this is why I mentioned Strong Towns earlier, who offers a wonderful guide to this. In their words, allow the next highest intensity of development by right, accessory dwelling units, duplexes, townhomes, nothing crazy. I'm not saying that NIMBYism really applies to this shelter location, because I do think there are things we need to take into account. But this is just something I want people to consider on other issues. Higher density is also great for Norman's economy. It's a basic argument. You can have low density, low taxes, or good services, but you can only have two. If we were a stronger town
You have
economically,
30 seconds left.
Thank you. Providing these services wouldn't be such a huge burden. Everyone wants to talk about homelessness. Nobody wants to talk about how land use, excessive parking lots, and the built environment in general affects things like homelessness or our traffic fatality epidemic, for example, or even having a general sense of community, which I think is a big part of our problem that we have here tonight. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Marguerite Larson? I hope I got that right.
Marguerite Larson, 1432 Huron. I wanted to address the homeless shelter. I think that this is a necessity. I feel like the way it's being planned, it's not being planned like an in and outdoor apartment complex. There are services that are going to be offered, which is going to be assisting our unhoused. There's services that are going to be offered that will help them with life skills. There will be other training. There will be the ability to have services coming in from counselors, and also to take into consideration the campus, the Norman Regional Campus across the street has plans to put in a mental health center there. So to me, it makes perfect sense to have all of this connected together. And just for a bit of information, it came through an oversight today that Food and Shelter said the majority of women who are staying at a friend's house are elderly and disabled. So I don't know where the fear of all of that is coming from. I don't understand it myself personally because I'm not afraid. I have a business. I work in downtown Norman, and I've never had any type of accounting of people accosting me or trying to get into my door. It's never happened. So I don't understand any of that either. But I do believe that this shelter is needed. I think that this is a great time to do it, and I am hoping that the Planning Commission says, yes, we do need to invest in our community. And I would like to also address the businesses around there. It seems like it would be safer for those businesses of people inside a shelter as opposed to watching them walk up and down Porter, which now they're doing. So that kind of alleviates that as well. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Terry Wise?
I'm Terry Wise. I live at 707 Tiffin Avenue. I back up to Francis Kate Park. It has no facilities. There's no bathrooms. There's no running water. Yet there's people living over there. There's one lady who, for a solid hour, screams at the top of her lungs before she goes to sleep. And then she goes underneath the pavilion and goes to sleep. There's another guy who walks around threatening to kill everybody, punching the air. So we're talking mentally opposed people. And so they can watch my house from where they are camping, which shouldn't be a big deal except for my mother lives next door, and she left her car unlocked one time, and they came in and ravaged it and tore it all up. That means they're checking my doors every night. These are not competent people. The people that are staying out in this park are using because they won't let them in the shelter if they're using. So I've got these drug addicts staying in my backyard, checking out my property. I call the police because I talked to Wade, the enforcement, and he's a great guy. He went and ran them off once because the police wouldn't. I called 911 because this guy's screaming at the top of his lungs, I'll effing kill you. And the dispatch says, have some compassion. We're not gonna enforce these laws. I was beside myself. I said, so you get to choose and pick which laws you enforce? Okay, so this puts my life, and I'm very capable of taking care of myself, but the majority of the people in my residence are old, elderly people. And so this is a true problem. There's no facilities over there. If you're gonna let them stay in a park, let them stay in this one. At least there's facilities. That's about all I have. I'm beside myself as far as where to put a homeless shelter, I'm not sure. But the 708, whatever it is, it's where they're camped out is 3 blocks from a grade school. I mean, you guys are big on enforcing codes. I just remodeled my house, and you guys were sticklers. I couldn't do any of the work. I had to hire these people because you wouldn't even come and look at my work. But then code enforcement, there is no overnight camping. There is none of that stuff over there, but yet you guys are letting it happen, and it's putting my life and other people's at risk. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Alex Lamphere, you may have to help me with your last name. Lamphere, that wasn't bad.
Alex Lamphere, Ward 2. I just want to say that I'm in support of this rezoning. I think Norman really needs this. I don't want to invalidate anybody's experiences with the unhoused community in Norman, but I think a lot of the problems that have been expressed tonight would be solved if you just put these people in a building. I mean, we need this. And finally, I just want to say, you know, a lot of people in this room are 1 or 2 paychecks away from being in that situation. So keep that in mind whenever you vote tonight. That could be you. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Hatcher?
Hello, Alan Hatcher, Ward 8. So I work with Norman Caravans. We provide free transportation for folks in Norman experiencing homelessness. Our work is very intertwined with the shelters, the night shelters and the day shelters. So there's been a lot of talk amongst our riders about this location. I'm very much in support of the rezoning to make this happen. There's a lot of excitement about this location, mainly because of the increased capacity. This is going to be a lot more folks who are not going to be sleeping on the street, which is not fun, whether it's summer or winter. There's been a lot of talk about fear and safety, and it makes me think about, we see that a lot when we have people in our vehicles that maybe have, let's say they had been evicted from their housing, and then maybe they had stayed with a friend until they had worn out their welcome, and then they had used the last of their savings to be at a hotel, and then that was it, they're out. And so a lot of times they end up calling us, and they have maybe 1 or 2 bags, and they are just in a panic, and they're terrified. And they're terrified for their safety. Are they going to sleep outside? If so, where are they going to sleep? Are they going to be arrested for sleeping outside? But these night shelters become such a beacon of hope and safety. And so a lot of times when we encounter someone who is very newly homeless, then it becomes kind of the mission of the day to get them into the night shelter. And sometimes it's tough because they're always at capacity. And so we do everything we can to get them there on time, and so they can kind of check in, be one of the first ones to check in, and hopefully get a bed for the night, and then be able to keep their bed and then have stability while they try to put their life back together. And there's such a contrast between just the fear and the panic and that they have before they're able to get into the shelter, and then afterwards, once they get in, once they're checked in, and they know for the next 12, 14 hours, they're safe. Their stuff is safe. The last remaining belongings that they have is safe. They're physically safe. They trust the staff is fantastic at our night shelter at a friend's house here in Norman and Salvation Army. And so that's the kind of safety that we care about with our work, and that and we see that unhoused Normanites are mostly concerned with.
Mr. Hatcher, you have 30 seconds.
Man, they went fast. I think with local businesses, these folks are spending money. The folks we give rides to are some of the most generous people I've met. Sonic is going to sell more tater tots whenever people are out of food and their friend is hungry, and they've got a few extra bucks. They're gonna provide their friends with dinner. They're going to spend money like they already are at these places. And as far as ID, and a good example for ID with the ID situation, we had someone the house they were renting burned down.
Thank you for sharing.
They were a veteran and they were in a wheelchair. They had no ID. It had burned up in the fire. They were able to stay at a friend's house that night because we didn't
Mr.
have
Hatcher,
an ID requirement. So that's an
You've
example of
exceeded
that.
3
Thank
minutes.
you.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. Next, we have Tabor Hallford.
Hello, my name is Tabor Halford, and I'm at 515 Miller Avenue. Just wanted to mention a couple things, maybe a couple that people haven't mentioned. I just want to say I completely support a permanent location for a shelter. I know some incredible unhoused people with unfortunate situations, although a certain percentage of those, I think like 30% mental health issues, 30 or 40% have drug issues and substance abuse. And so just one thing with that, with safety, the location of the shelter is on Porter. And just thinking about the new bus station over there, and then Andrews Park and the library, and just the traffic routes along Porter, along the sidewalk. Everyone knows Porter's a pretty tight street already. People fly in the mornings. And when the people are going to be released from that center is around 7 a.m., early morning. People are going to work. Right around Tarahumara's is a pretty tight intersection at Acres. It's already pretty tight. And so people are going to be walking on sidewalks. Today, actually, someone's crossing the street. Looked like they had maybe some alcohol or something like that, and they were kind of dancing around the middle of the street earlier, and this was kind of over by Brahms area. So just adding those people to that kind of location right there is for the safety of those people I'm a little concerned about. Also to our family, we go to Here I Grow, which is at Trinity, just probably 500 feet away. It's daycare. My daughter graduated from pre-K today there. But it's not a terrible issue. It has been an issue. I've had to call the police, had to direct them to call the police. We have a lot of parents who drop off, again, same time that they would be released early in the morning. Same thing at Wilson Elementary. Again, traffic routes from Andrews and the library through those same areas. I'm just afraid with that increase in people walking through there, there's been issues. And I think the uptake in that will be significant. Just kind of concerned again about some of the planning with it, kind of lack of clarity on the sex offender, low barrier things that have been mentioned. It seems like they want to have a plan, but it's not clear enough.
You have 30 seconds left.
Yeah, I feel like this is a location, but not a permanent location. We're trying to make a bad location work, and it's going to be a permanent location. Even when they find a new permanent location, this will probably still be some sort of shelter. So that's something to keep in mind. I won't just do away with it. The city will still own it. So anyways, thank you.
All right, thanks for sharing. Stephen Falconberry.
Stephen Falconberry, 1101 West Eufaula Street. All of us care about these people, and I have no problem giving to a law-abiding citizen who needs my help. So it seems like we have a divide here between vagrant, uncivilized, drugged out idiots and law-abiding citizens that I would love to help. So we need our city council to enforce some laws in this town to get uncivilized, violent people off our streets, and then we can start helping the people that want the help. So thank you for listening. I've been window cleaning in this town for 20 years, and it's been getting so bad on East Main Street, I've seen businesses up and leave. I'm so tired of what I'm seeing in this town, and I'm born and raised here 45 years, that I had to come down here and say something tonight because I feel like our city council has lied to us and subverted the vote of the people, and this commission is the firewall between the city council and they're subverting the will of the people, trying to prevent this from happening. So once the city council comes up with a better plan to enforce some law and order in this town and take the freedoms away from people that deserve to lose their freedom for how uncivilized and violent they are, then we can get forward with giving our money and our time and our efforts to helping people that really need it and that are ready to accept it. So thank you for listening.
Thanks for sharing. Russell Rice.
Sorry, I'm tired, y'all. I'm sure you guys are too. Russell Rice, Ward 2, what is it? 1854 Rolling Hill Street. I too work with Norman Caravans sometimes. Just wanted to throw this out there. Where this location is at, it's within eyesight of 2 other shelters. We don't want to silo poverty, but we want to keep them close to resources if they're going to, seek services. 90% of the issues that you guys have heard about today would go away if we had a shelter, day and night shelter. Easy solution. That is incorrect. I shouldn't reply to them. No resources on the west side for the unhoused, so there's no shelter over there for the unhoused, for the NIMBYs. Anyways, thank you very much for your time. You all have a great day.
All right, thank you for sharing. Next, we have Teresa Sterling.
Teresa Sterling, 281 West Tecumseh Road. I'm in Ward 6, and I'm going to try to go quickly because I got a lot to say. And I'm extremely direct, so I hope I don't offend anybody. What we really need to know, and what I'm going to tell you is the truth about what a low barrier shelter is. It means no barrier. It means you don't have to have an ID. It means anybody comes in. They can say they're not going to accept sex offenders, but they will, because sex offenders lie. I was a child abuse detective, sex crimes detective, and I started the sex offender registration unit in the Oklahoma City Police Department. And I've interviewed thousands of them. They lie. So you will have sex offenders there. If you take the sex offenders out of the equation, what do you have? You have violent offenders. You have serial property crime offenders and vandals and everything else. Yes, you have people that need help. The lady over here that is at the safe house for women, that's a great thing. We need more of that. But she wanted help. The difference here is we have transients and we have homeless. She's the definition of a homeless person. Because of circumstances, she's homeless. She's wanting help, she's getting help, and she has a place to go. Transients are different. They don't play by the rules. They don't want to play by the rules. They want to just do what they want to do. They want to live on the street. They don't want you to tell them what to do. Has anybody, raise a hands, walked out of your back door of your business and stepped in human feces? I have. So until you've done that, I mean, it's horrible what's happening on our streets. I had a friend who owns a vet clinic on Porter, and on her, she just showed me a video. I was in there with my little Bernedoodle, and showed me a video of a man jumping her 8-foot fence that's supposed to protect us all, and masturbating in her courtyard. Masturbating. I don't know. I'm not okay with that. Not only do we need to be concerned about the low barrier portion of this.
You have 30 seconds left.
We need to be concerned about the fact that we are putting tarhumaras, which I don't like Mexican food, but I love his food. You're potentially putting them out of business. Seriously. One last thing I'd like to say is, for anyone having trouble with transients, because the city of Norman has told the police department not to do their jobs, you need to call the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. They will help you. They will come out. If it's your property, they will remove them. They will remove their
Mrs.
belongings
Sterling.
free of charge.
Thank you for your comment. Josh Candill? No, Josh. Rory Tower? That's
Hi, I'm Robin Tower, 212 East Hubert, so smack in the middle of all of this. I retired this year, and as one of my retirement hobbies, I started organizing a neighborhood association for silk stocking. So silk stocking is Robinson to Gray and Porter to the railroad tracks. So we're right now sort of the center of all the homeless activities, except for what's over at Food and Shelter on the east side. And in talking to our neighborhood, the people in our neighborhood, as I organize this, I mean, it's a very serious problem. And I'm very compassionate for the homeless people, and I feel like solutions are very important for our community. But an overnight shelter where at 8 a.m. you send out 100 people into silk stocking neighborhood, it doesn't feel like a good solution to silk stocking. And we feel like we've already, we've got the Salvation Army, we've got, and we've got the library, which is where a lot of the homeless people go during the day because they don't have anywhere to go. So I'm thinking if you're going to invest $2 million in an overnight shelter, why stop there? Why not put more money into something that'll be a day place? They can be during the day rather than they're just let out and they have nowhere to go except our neighborhood. That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Savine, I'm not going to try your last name. I'm going to let you share that.
Savina Canova, 504 North Crawford. So I'm only 4 blocks away from this proposed site, and it's hard to expound much more on what everyone else has said. Kind of like what the last lady just said. It's just like acres is already a thoroughfare. I mean, from my place where I live, I see them day and night walking up. They've gone through our backyard. The girl that lives upstairs from me had her bike stolen out of our backyard just right outside my dining room window. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of good people. I know that, there's, I work also in East Norman, on East Main. And so constantly we have a problem there as well. The thing I'm seeing the most that really upsets me is just the trash in our town. And the theft is just such a big problem. And one of my solutions, I know this doesn't really pertain to you guys because you're a planning commission, but for anyone else, if this could help, if, instead of just handing out free handouts like food or whatever, hand out trash bags. And it's like, earn that meal, go out, take that trash bag, fill it up with trash, bring it back, and then you've earned a meal. And you're just cleaning up after yourselves anyway. And I liked your idea about the Griffin, over in Griffin, because I know that they're just, they're going to move out Griffin Hospital. I think that would be a good location. So I'm just, I just feel like putting it in a neighborhood. That's really my objection, because like the last lady just said, it's just an overnight. I know it's close to services, but we're not talking about an apartment. This isn't a full-time, shelter. It's just an overnight. So yes, when they get dumped out, I used to walk. I've lived in my place for 6 years now, and I used to walk at all times. And now I don't feel safe walking through my neighborhood because there are crazy people walking around just, talking to themselves. And anyway, so I just feel like if we could find a solution that's just not in a neighborhood, further out, that would be great. Also, I heard about this building too. I don't know if it's true. That only has like 1 bathroom on the first floor. So I know there's going to be a lot of money that needs to be put into this building to even make it viable for this, this proposition anyway. So I feel like, as a taxpayer, I would like to see our money better well spent someplace else. Thank you.
All right, thanks for sharing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our stack of public comments. So I'm going to open it up for Planning Commission discussion. Does anybody have any comments that they would like to share? I do want to remind everyone that we've heard a lot of things and that we are voting tonight on the amendment to the rezoning, amendment to the transportation plan, so just keep that in mind. But anybody else have any other comments?
Sure, I'll share a comment. First of all, I want to thank everyone for speaking tonight. I know it's not easy to get up there and speak in front of a room of people, especially if you don't do it often. I'm sympathetic to the concerns. Both sides. Almost like we heard, homeless people are people. But business owners, they have rights. Property owners, they have rights too. And so how do you balance this out? One of my primary concerns is the city doesn't seem to have a plan to address these anxieties. If there's a legitimate concern that Tarahumara's is going to be severely negatively impacted, but I haven't heard any plan from the city for what they're going to do. Is there a plan to have a beat cop, bicycle police, on patrol in the area? That would help. Out of sight, out of mind. That's a real thing. If you have a police presence, I'm not talking about cracking skulls. I'm not talking about just rounding people up and putting them in jail. I'm saying just a presence. Having someone wander across the road drunk, that can be stopped just with a simple police presence. But I haven't heard a plan from the city on this. And I want to vote yes on this. I don't have anywhere we put it, it's going to be a problem. We all know that. We also know that we need to address this problem, so it has to go somewhere. But it shouldn't come without a greater plan. And right now, the city doesn't seem to have a greater plan, and this really concerns me.
For going back about 4.5 weeks ago, I missed a couple of some meetings here, and I have a 91-year-old mother, and she fell 4 weeks ago. Didn't know if I was going to be here tonight, even, but over that time, she fell. She ended up with a brain bleed. It was devastating at my house. Okay, and while my mom is not homeless, she lives in a very nice house across the street, 3 houses down from me. For 3 weeks, she lived over there at that hospital. 7 days in intensive care, 7 or 8 more days in progressive care. The people at that hospital were amazing to her. 7 more days in rehabilitation, and we came home. Today, yesterday we went to a neurosurgeon, and the blood clot in her brain was shrinking tremendously. And today with home health, with her physical therapy, she walked more than she did about 3 months ago. So blessings. What does that have to do with this? For almost 21 days, I was at that hospital multiple times over and over and over. And I see both sides of this story right here. So much. Because I would leave at 10 o'clock at night. Most time I would leave at 8:30. Hadn't been in Tarahumara's in years. I helped a lot of rent there. My wife was like, you don't even, I think one of the ladies said, I'm not a Mexican food fan, but I had nachos like 5 nights in a row. Don't ask why. It wasn't the Modelo's, okay? I'm just saying. But I frequented there. And there was one evening that I told my wife, and she brought her truck, and I brought my car, and we moved. Because when she parked, there were people at the entrance here, and I was nervous to leave her Z71 truck sitting there. Didn't really care about my little Honda Accord, but we moved our vehicles because of where it was. At the same time, I saw people that were really needing. They were really needing help. And so I agree with the fellow commissioner. This is a hard decision for both sides because I absolutely see both sides. I just wanted to let y'all know that this weighs on me, and I'm sure everybody sitting here tremendously because we all love Norman as well. We love this town. I'm not from the city. I'm from North Carolina. But I've been here for over 30 years, and it's home. It was so much home that I moved my mom and dad out here from North Carolina to be with me. Begging, kicking, screaming, and them leaving, but I got them to move.
Thanks for sharing that. Any other comments?
I have a few comments. I also want to thank everybody who's spoken tonight. Especially want to thank a few individuals. The unhoused individual who spoke, that meant a lot and that was brave to do. I believe her name is Maggie Jablonski. Thank you for your comments. I think that children have amazing insight into many things that we've become jaded by over time. So it's always amazes me what my 7-year-old will tell me and what makes me forget about things in the world and humanity. Also want to thank the gentleman who spoke with Norman Caravans. That's amazing service that you all provide in this community. Actually, 2 individuals with Caravans who spoke, and amazing service you provide in this community, and is solving a lot of the issues that were brought up in this room that are occurring with those experiencing homelessness and getting people off the streets into the places where they need to go. So thank you. I also want to thank everybody who has been affected by this issue. This is not. It's been I'm echoing what's been said. This is not an automatic yes. This is not an automatic no by any means in my book. I know there's issues going on. Again, I've got a 4 and a 7-year-old. We frequent Andrews Park every weekend. I'm at the skate park with my son, 4-year-old son, for an hour and a half, 2 hours seemingly every Saturday and Sunday. How much he loves to do it. He always asks to go over to the park and play over there, and it's really heartbreaking to see how much mental health issues we have in this community. At the same time, I know that this is part of the world we live in now. This is not a Norman issue. Not a Norman issue by any means. Any comments that are discussing what has happened to Norman, I can tell you it's happening everywhere, and it's especially happening everywhere in this state, and among many other states that are not allocating necessary funding to mental health issues, and also there's been comments about. About how our city needs to build in the future, and that's exacerbated by being a car-driven culture and not building with higher densities where you have more housing units that are available to normalize the market. That's been an exacerbated issue in our community with housing prices. Housing prices are shooting through the roof, and they're shooting through the roof if we're saying that in Norman. Again, in other communities, it's even worse. So this is a housing problem that was mentioned, a book that I have not read, but I've now heard 3 recommendations for tonight. Homelessness is a housing problem. I am excited to read that. I'm also scared to read it because I know that we have a long way to go in what we need to do. I will say I do have concerns. I echo the concerns of Commissioner Jablonski that we have a business that is next door that is going to be affected by this. We have other businesses that will be affected by it. And we need to come up with a plan to help alleviate that if this were to move forward in a serious plan. It's something that is not only something that is a plan, but is enforced. And we occasionally do have an enforcement issue in this town. So let's figure this out and fix it. Let's also support organizations like Norman Caravans that direct people who are experiencing homelessness to places where they need to be, and additional resources even beyond a shelter. we need to support that. If we're not supporting it, then all the issues that were discussed in this room, it will only continue. It'll only get worse, because there's a very fine line between experiencing homelessness and what that can do to your mental capacity the longer that goes on. I think it's important to also clarify that there's been a lot of discussion about vagrancy and crime, and individuals who are intentionally thieving or stealing or defecating, or just go down the list of all the words that have been said. A lot of that's a mental health issue, but I also think it's just as important to consider that the story we heard tonight from the lady who is experiencing homelessness is one of many. That's one of many, many stories, and that's what's weighing in my mind is, do we have some lawlessness going on? Yeah, absolutely. That happens anywhere in any type of capacity and any type of demographic. Do we also have a lot of people in need? Very much so. And if we don't figure out a solution to that, then that's, in my book, casting somebody away that we're just giving up on them, basically. There's also been a lot of discussion about someplace else. It was made clear in the comments from the city attorney that this has been a 3-year effort, an intense study. And I know a lot of the individuals who have been involved in this study of trying to find the right place. If you think anybody's sitting on their hands saying, oh, well, this property just came up and this is a convenient excuse to go find something else. No, this is the best temporary solution in my book right now. And I do believe that it's temporary. That might not, there may be individuals in this room who may not believe that, but I do believe that the city will continue to work towards a permanent solution that will never still be a perfect solution. There will never be a perfect solution here. But this is leading in a direction of being able to shelter more individuals. And in my book, that's really what it comes down to, because more individuals who, as our housing issue and our housing crisis continues to be worse and worse and worse, our capacity is probably exponentially going in the wrong direction. And so being able to do something is better than nothing. I do urge the city, again, I think there has to be a plan. And I urge the council to come up with that plan to the best of the ability that you can as part of the potential passage of this shelter, because I do think that I'm a property owner and on Gray Street, have a business there. And I'm not going to speak to this as a neighbor, but I can speak to that affecting a business, and it's real. And I am sympathetic to that. I'm empathetic to it. And I do wish that there was more of an effort to figure out how to enforce some issues that are going on, especially during the daytime. And I know that's not easy to do. Again, we're not alone in that, but I urge that, and then I also urge the city to really think of this as a temporary solution. And part of that is absolutely want this to be a place that somebody can be relatively proud of in the situation that they're in, or thankful for, if nothing else, that they do have a place to be housed overnight. Also encourage whoever the provider is, and however we can support the idea of having day shelter as well. because I do think that that would help quite a bit. And I don't know if that's on the table at all. I don't even know if that's possible, but it seems to me that if you can do a night shelter, then you can do also a day shelter. Everything costs money. And then lastly, my last point is, I think a good point was made that we talk about taxpayer money and the costs associated with this. I can't speak to what the net benefit is to the community as far as costs, but I do know that that unhoused individuals are a significant cost on the community, whereas housed, even in a shelter environment, are much less so. So you're really balancing, what probably ends up being a wash in my book. And so, I know there's a lot of comments, but I do thank everyone who spoke tonight.
I also want to say thank you to everybody who took the time to come. I know it's been a long evening, and I'll try to keep my comments short. This is a really tough issue for me. I see both sides, and I am empathetic to both. The Homelessness is a Housing Problem book has been mentioned, and I can recommend. I'm partway through it. And I think it's very enlightening to understand the problem. And I think we have to look at the root causes of why individuals are experiencing homelessness. The annual report was released. We're going to vote on it here in a little bit. And the median price of a home in Norman is $384,000, an increase of $80,000 over the past year, if I've got my figures right. That's a problem. And I'm just telling you the figure, and I'm agreeing that that is a problem. It contributes to homelessness, and we have to look at the root causes of why this is happening. One individual action is not going to solve the problem, and it's going to take all of us working together to figure this out. I have concerns about the impacts that will be on the neighborhood, on the surrounding businesses, and I'm not sure that we have answered those questions about the impact fully, and I would like to see more answers before this moves forward. I do support the idea of a shelter along with the day shelter. I think both are key components, and I would urge the city, as Commissioner Brewer has suggested, I think that is extremely important to curb some of the problems that happen in the daytime as well. If you got a lot of time on your hands, you're probably not making the best decisions even in a normal circumstance. So let's look at both of those options. It's a tough problem, and again, I want to echo what my fellow commissioners have said. I support what they've said, and together we have to figure this out. But we need to figure out what the impacts are before we move forward.
Just real quick, I just want to see a complete plan. I feel like we're just moving things around. And it's the charge of the council to come up with a complete plan and then provide that to the citizens of Norman to be able to understand what they're trying to accomplish, and then be able to allow us to vote. So that's just, we've done it once. So my thought is, I need to understand more about what we want to do here. And if it's just moving to another location, what's the additional plan to help solve the homeless problem, help solve this issue? So that's just me, and that's where I'm probably sitting today. So,
Any other final comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say also, I appreciated everyone's comments. It's a very complex issue. I've donated time and food to Norman Food and Shelter, and I also work at a school on East Main at 12th and Main, and have had unpleasant experiences, despite being pleasant on my end, with homeless individuals. So it is complex, and I don't want anyone to feel unvalidated on either side. I want to say that
everyone's truth was heard. And I especially want to thank council for Tara Humara. I felt like the points that you made helped kind of cut through the emotion appeal on both sides of this complex issue to remind us that there is more fiscal research and more full planning that's needed before we really can move it forward. I feel like it's on us to make sure there's a good plan, not just a plan. And I guess that's all I'll say.
Okay, thank you, commissioners, for those comments. Are we prepared to move towards a vote?
To clarify, if we make a motion, you prefer not a motion of rejection, but a motion to approve and then to vote nay if that's so be your, okay.
That's correct.
Then I move to approve.
And a vote?
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion failed 1-7.
So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Everybody has been very respectful of each other, and as a community, I appreciate that. That shows that we can take steps in the right direction, but we're going to take a 5-minute break in case you want to continue to be respectful and call it a night. We've got a couple more items, but we'll be back, so.
How many are you taking? How many milligrams?
800.
Sorry, Jim.
You're gonna get in trouble, Steve.
I know.
Because you're not on the.
This is reminiscent of city council.
No, we got more business, a little bit more.
Yeah, let's do.
That's why
Next
he's
week's
still here. We got business.
Next month, we can do this. How critical is this?
Not much.
She's right
Oh,
down there.
Liz is not.
James sitting here because she's.
Oh, okay.
I feel bad for people who had items
Liz is
after
here.
that. We maybe should have voted to hear those items before.
Glad of you to join us.
You know what I mean? And get
Yeah.
the easy peasies done, but.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm on, right? All right, we're going to move on to item number 8. Item 8 is for consideration of approval, exception, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number 02324-7, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Section 36-552, fencing, walls, and screening of Chapter 36, zoning of the Code of the City of Norman, to allow for administrative review and approval of request for variations in fence height forward of the front setback line and providing for the severability thereof. Does staff have a presentation? Oh, and this one is to be postponed, or is the request? So do we have can we take a motion on that?
I make a motion to postpone.
Second.
Okay, and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 8-0.
Okay,
Why not?
do I read number 9?
Mhm.
Okay. Number 9, consideration of approval, exception, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of annual 2022 status report on development of the Norman 2025 plan. Is there, okay.
Planning Director. Yes, we are going to present tonight the annual status report for the Norman 2025. Just the contents of the report, it summarizes development activity throughout the city for 2022. It analyzes the development and construction trends for the last 5 years, and it identifies the amendments of zoning and land use that we've had for 2022. So we'll have, within the report, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but just I'm going to give you some numbers and kind of outline the direction that we've gone with growth. But within the report, we've got the background information, construction activity for residential, non-residential, the land use plan amendments, the zoning amendments, plating and subdivision activity, and then the summary and future outlook. So for 2022, the total construction value is $426 million. It is down from 2021 from $560. The residential construction value is $176 million, and that also is down from $226 for the previous year. Single-family construction decreased in 2022, which ended that upward trend that we had had. As you can see, in 2022, we had 377, 21, 559, 537 in 2020, 434 in 2019, and in 2018, we had 397. This gives us a 5-year average of about 461 single-family units annually. So for multifamily, which is the 3+ multifamily construction, that fell in 2022. We fell down to 5.7. In 2021, we had 22 million, and we had some apartment complexes and stuff, of course, that are going to offset that some. Multifamily construction decreased. You can see the numbers here. In 22, we had 34 units. Big drop from 21, where we had 199. 20, we had 440. 19, we had 15. And in 2018, we had 88 units. For our duplexes, we actually had an increase in 2022 that landed at 3.1 million, and that's up from 2021. The pace of the duplex construction increased in 2022, and it took us back to our close, toward our 2019 numbers, which we had 14 in 2022. And I'll show you on the map here in a minute what we can attribute some of the duplex construction to. Then moving on to our non-residential construction, that had gone, I'm sorry, wait. Okay, the non-residential construction was down, but our addition alteration construction for non-residential had actually gone up. So for non-residential construction, we had 250, and that was down from 334. The non-residential addition alteration construction was 124, and that was up from 46 in the previous year. And again, I can show you on the map some of those. Again, we've just outlined that we've got the maps, the tables, as Commissioner McCowan pointed out. We've got the average of the single-family home that's in there as well for general information. And the tables that are in there in the maps, it just puts the development into a framework showing the trends and everything that we have here in town. So this is the residential construction activity, and can you guys see you can see my mouse on your screens there? So you can see that the residential construction is within our, urbanized area. We had, obviously we had development out east, but those are going to be on the larger lot development and everything. For our single family, we had, find the mouse. We're developing further out here, on the eastern edge, and you can kind of see how it's going up toward the west side. So for our mobile home activity, you can see that was obviously out in the rural areas. We had one over on the west side. And the duplex area is in here, as well as the multifamily area, and that's centered around where we had the Center City Form-Based Code. So that's going to be our 3, 4, 5 unit buildings that have been built, as well as the duplexes. So that's just located there north of the university. For non-residential, new non-residential construction, it's clearly all over the city. We had several large projects. You'll see over here where we had some focused around the hospital, over on Rock Creek, some commercial development going over there. We had 3 or 4 city projects over here on Robinson. You can see these areas here. Again, some larger city projects down south. Oh, I do want to point out too, I thought this as I was looking at this. So in 2020, you'll see the green out here. That was when we had the increase in the medical marijuana businesses. So that's what's going on out there. When I was looking, I was like, that's really odd. And then again, our addition alteration projects spread out throughout the city, but you can see I-35, and then you can see the areas here in Core Norman as well. For our land use plan changes, we had 10, and that was 2 more than in 2021. And I won't go through all of those, but you can see on the maps in the agenda where a lot of those were located. And again, in the urbanized area. We had 18 rezonings in 22, and surprisingly, that was 12 less than we had in 2021. I was surprised at that number. It seemed like we were pretty busy. But we had one of the large projects over here on the east side. We had 50 acres, and that was the City of Norman project. We had the pink one up north, and that was a PUD that had come back and rezoned to put some multifamilies and different uses in there. And then here's our platting history. Again, in the urbanized area, we've got a couple, out here that are spread out, but for the most part, we're keeping, as the land use plan wanted us to, we're keeping our development within the urbanized area instead of, developing more intensely further out east. Here's our certificates of survey, which are the 10 acres or more, and those again are going to be in East Norman. We've had several out there in the last 3 years, so several large developments out there of 10 acres or more. And I added this one just so sometimes you guys don't see this, but generally the statistics for 22, and this is just for planning, development services, we're building permits and such. We had 8,000 permits issued, 3 million in revenue collected for our building permits. We had 27,000 inspections completed. Trade license for our trade contractors, 1,100. And then we issued over 1,000 certificates of occupancy for construction projects. And that's both residential and commercial. So, any questions?
Just one question. Does it make sense for us to break out the commercial into maybe City of Norman projects, institutional projects, OU projects? I wonder if there's a way for us to really figure out if there's true commercial. When I think commercial, I'm thinking about businesses or something like that.
We could. We've got that data. I mean, we can, figure out, are you wanting a specific number of commercial, addition, alteration, commercial projects and stuff like that?
It's just, I'd like to see how that's growing, because I think the city we passed a couple of bonds, schools passed a couple of bonds.
Schools were a big impact on
Yeah,
the difference in the
and to see
monies.
how that commercial line, the true commercial line, is growing, or if it's, not growing. And, because I think we've seen a lot of growth in the commercial side of it, but how much is that city and school, OU?
I'll find out.
Just a thought. Not that I want you to add that maybe
I can add it
next
to
year.
the list, don't worry.
Thank you.
It was just, a thought came to my mind looking at this. Is it possible to see the shape of growth normalizing for the cost of construction materials? Because in the pandemic, construction material pricing has been wonky.
Still up, yeah.
And so what looks like a downturn, I mean, that might just be a pricing, that in 22 and 21, materials were more expensive.
Yeah, I'm sure it is to an extent, definitely. I'm hearing that it is still up. Anything else?
Anything else?
Can I tell you that this will be the next, fingers crossed, this will be the next to the last 2025 annual report that you guys will get, because the next time, not the next time, but the one after that, should be from our new comprehensive plan that we will be working on over the next 18 months. Fingers crossed.
All right, so can I get a motion on number 9?
Move to approve.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 8-0.
Are there any additional comments?
I do have a couple comments. I did want to, is my mic on? I don't know that it matters. Did want to just comment on the first application, or no, first application bank. I just want to clarify that I had no issue with the Armstrong Bank plan, but I do think it's dangerous for us to be voting on a PUD that's 40 acres that is speculative in nature, and that we didn't really dig into with a lot of questions. So that, I just want to clarify, like, the Armstrong Bank plan, that's fine, but like, that was a massive site that basically they planned to then get the Armstrong Bank built. And that's just kind of for future, there was a lot there and not a lot of scrutiny as far as just like what was actually there. So, and then the only comment I would make, just to fellow commissioners, is I would encourage every one of you to keep a constant conversation with council. That's something that I've been trying to do. I communicate with nearly every council member and the mayor to try to make sure that I'm kind of wrapping my head around what they're working on, because there's a lot of the things that we're seeing are things that they have, forgive my language, busting their ass on to figure out planning for, and maybe it's a lack of something's lost in the process in educating, but I was kind of informed after the process that a lot of the things that we were asking about to come up with a more comprehensive plan for what was going to be going on with the shelter, a lot of those plans are in place. Maybe some of that communication needs to come from staff side to make sure that we know exactly what the plan is if this is being discussed with council. But I think it's just really about educating ourselves to make sure that we know what has been discussed at the council level before it's coming back our way, because ultimately it's going to come back their way and they kind of have an idea of where things are going. So just a few thoughts. That was, especially the shelter, that was not an easy vote. We all know that, every one of us. And so that's not a point of frustration with where the votes came. It was just, and that's a reminder to myself too, that there were some things I didn't know that we're allowed to talk to council is an important reminder. We're allowed to do that. And so whether it's talking to your council member or, talking to a few of them to make sure we know what's going on, I think that's just really important. So, but thank you all though.
Anything else before we adjourn? Michael, do you look like you're going to say something?
I always want to say something.
We're listening.
Looking at that PUD, I saw a sea of concrete. And, I would check my phone. It's like, oh, it's only 93 today. And then I get in my car, and my car says 106. And it's because we have a heat island. And I think that we need to start thinking, how are we going to decrease the amount of heat? If we had trees interspersed inside of these massive parking lots, that would help. And I'm not saying I have a good solution, but I'm saying I do think it's something that we need to think about, because looking 20 and 30 years out, there's going to be a lot more heat, especially in summer. And so what can we start, what foundation can we lay over the next few years to change the way we develop thinking about managing heat? That's all I'm going to say.
I promise I'll keep this short. I agree, and I also think that's why it's dangerous approving a 40-acre PUD without really digging into some of these questions because essentially we just approved something that can be developed by right now. And, while the Armstrong Bank building was one component of that, everything else in there, some developer could buy that entire piece of land and build exactly what's there without, the scrutiny of exactly what was there. So, and if you're okay with the site plan, that's totally fine. That's a completely different story, but it's just, got to think through the implications of a huge site like that, and asking some of those questions and thinking through, are our parking ratios correct? Do you need 79 spots for senior center, senior living center that may not require that much? What could you have in lieu of that? Because, you heard it, they maximized their impervious surface. And that was basically to maximize the land value potential to sell that land to a developer, to someone else, basically saying, you can go do this by right. So.
Good.
I think that your comments about the dangers of lack of scrutiny, I feel like going back a couple meetings where there was a lot of scrutiny, and yet something got passed without us making sure that our feelings, advisements, not feelings, advisements is a better word, were attached to it. And the statement was, we can trust our council. And council did not add any of those limitations. And so they got the blank check at Midway, and there's now a lawsuit. So I think we all need to realize whether it's a parking lot blank check or whether it's noise ordinance blank check or whatever it is. I think, we need to make sure that, yes, we can trust our council, but they're also trusting that we're going to do our utmost to give them a clear picture of what we want. And since we didn't do that, we communicated, just say yes, if that makes sense. And just like we did on this one. And yes, any developer could buy that up, but they have to develop that or they're back in front of us. So it's not as much of a blank check as Midway got, because they could do 7 days a week, outside, full occupancy, whatever, with what we gave them. So you're right, absolutely right, that we need to scrutinize things a little bit more.
I was going to simply say, and I do believe they were required to do that, to do the PUD, correct? I'm sorry, to do what? They were required to have that completely.
Yes, that's what
designed
he
out.
said, yeah. So that's why if they wanted to do anything different, like it's not an extreme blank check, like they would have to come back before us to change it without making it, they don't have to come back to us to make the parking lot smaller, but if they wanted to put a,
4 or 5%. To your
Yeah.
question, yes, they have to do the PUD to build that building, but that doesn't mean that we should approve the PUD just because they had to do the PUD. I think, yes, time is money, absolutely true with development, but I do think that there is, we have the ability to make sure we're comfortable with something, and that can be a postponement to allow a developer to come back to make any changes, if that's something that we want to do as a commission. So.
Okay. Everybody good?
I needed 10 more minutes.
do we need to move to adjourn?
I said 10:30.
You're close enough. We'll give you your 10:30.